I'm here. I don't
Good.
even know what this is.
We're going to talk about the fifth tarot tonight.
Fifth tarot. Okay.
Yeah, the fifth suit, and Skip is responsible for it, and I have prepared something such as it is,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so I'm going to share it with you. And let's see here.
And we are live.
Yes, and we
Oh,
are
really?
live
Just-
on YouTube. And so good
great.
evening, everyone on YouTube. We are in the process of getting ourselves together to start talking about the fifth tarot. And it's my responsibility tonight to make a presentation about it, which I will do. And we will try to be sensitive to your suggestions about it. The fifth tarot is a controversial idea which says that there should be a fifth suit in the tarot, a full 14 card suit. And at least one tarot developer has done that. They've called their cards the fifth tarot. And they have a book that describes it. Okay, I'm going to turn off my cloaking for a minute so you can see this. Okay, so there is the fifth tarot, created it. There's a whole book about it. And many of us in this group have copies of the tarot deck, which is here, the fifth tarot. And it is a full, it's a full extra suit of 14 cards. So that in this particular deck, there are 96 cards instead of 72. And
78, right, yeah.
So what was your point?
78. 96 is 78.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah,
okay.
just a number.
Oh, okay. So it's 92 cards. It's not 96.
Yeah, there you go.
It's 14 more cards. And yeah, I got myself wound up into a different number. I lost track of what I was talking
I get
about.
struck by dyslexia all the time, so
Well,
I get it.
Right. So anyway, what we're going to do here is we're going to try to create inputs which anyone can use to develop a fifth suit, understanding that you can tell the pioneers by the arrows in their chests. So if you create a tarot deck with 5 suits, chances are people are going to shoot at it for one reason or another. And so in no way do I want to suggest that I'm intending to diss the work of the people that put together the fifth tarot.
Teressena, Martien, Bakens.
Yeah, it's a tremendous effort, and it was extremely courageous to be the first to publish such a tarot deck, and now we have to refine it a bit, okay, as would have happened with all the suits of the tarot 600 years ago. In other words, the tarot did not spring by immaculate conception into the 78 degrees of wisdom without a lot of development beforehand. Okay, so just because the Visconti could put together 78 cards, or just because the people that did the Marseille deck could put together 78 cards, they didn't do that by immaculate conception. There was a lot of thinking that went into it. But once they did it and achieved that, then there's been very little change in 600 years. But now the human species has evolved further. And thanks to the work of all kinds of people going back into the 19th century and maybe before, the apparent usefulness of the fifth tarot is present, in my opinion. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the fifth tarot deck itself, at least the 1 through 10, cards 1 through 10. And I'm going to give a synopsis of what the developers of that deck said on that card. And then I'm going to give a synopsis of my thoughts. Now, because this is a Carl Jung depth psychology channel, I'm going to be informed by some of the thinking of Carl Jung. And Carl Jung was, he was way, way ahead of his time. And he started to talk about the stages of psychological development, which is what interests me about the possibilities in the fifth tarot. And so to that end, I'm going to begin, and then we're going to have a pretty open discussion, so please interrupt me as I go along, and we'll see where this gets. I just simply have to find it on my desktop. Okay. All right. So here we go. Okay. So the people who published the fifth tarot called their fifth suit the Lotus suit. And they said the Lotus suit represents ether, the life force that flows through all creation. And I'm not wild about that categorization of a fifth suit for a number of reasons. And I believe that the fifth tarot should be about the quintessence of the human being. And so on the left, you're going to have their position. On the right, you're going to have mine, and then we'll see if we can refine what I've said a bit. Okay, but at the beginning, I just want to point out, one, that I think it's about the uniqueness of the human being. I think that all other four suits can be pointed to in other creatures, but the fifth suit can only relate to human beings, number one. Number two, it's about consciousness itself, and it's about God's awareness of God's creation. And it is about the life force that flows through all creation. I agree with that. And so I'm going to begin with the one of the Lotus suit. And here's what they say. The Lotus suit represents the ether, as I've said, and it represents expansion and growth at all levels. She blossoms like a lotus opening to higher states of consciousness. Importance of inner vision. We create our own reality, and it's about love and bliss. So this is their number one card for this suit. My take is that it's about C.G. Jung's stages of consciousness. And so the one should be about the human infant and about the beginning of consciousness and participation mystique, which is what the stage of consciousness that emerges at the beginning of the life. So comments, let's talk about it. I can make some edits on my side of the thing if you want, or you can just say your quibbles about either side.
I think a great quote to substantiate your 3 points on the Jungian side of consciousness would be from Anai Nin, when she said, "There comes a time when the risk and pain to remain tight in the bud is greater than the pain it takes to blossom. I mean, I think that's similar to what actually when the pain to remain tight in the bud became more of a risk than it took to blossom, and that seems to be in line with the infant, the beginning of consciousness, and the participatio mystique, blossoming, opening.
Well, and they're saying the same thing, and I'm essentially, I mean, they're saying she blossoms, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying all of us blossom,
right?
And you know, their way of talking about this is much more feminine than I might select to do. So this is a feminine individual in their card, and I think it's not an adult person. And it could be either sex. And you know, beyond that, I don't necessarily disagree because, as I've pointed out to people a few times, fugu fish are making mandalas, and we separated from fugu fish 200 million years ago. And so even an infant could have mandalas in their consciousness, such as it is. And so, you know, I don't want to critique the image per se, because I think it's a beautiful image, what they created here for this card. And I just think that there should be a different slant to the fifth suit, that's all.
And I would agree. I let everyone else go. I think one quick thing, though, the feminine, I think, is appropriate here because the creative principle is that birth. So there is the feminine principle in both males and females. That's that place of creation where it feels that's appropriate.
I agree with that. I agree with the feminine, that it's a feminine duty to create a human life, and that feminine instinct is in both men and women. I do agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I even call my creativity my man womb. So I mean, it's like it's feminine. What else does what do others have to say?
Well, I can say a couple of things. I love the word quintessence. I don't know what it means.
Well, it means the essence of human consciousness, I think, is the way that Jung was thinking about it. And
interesting. I like the way you've juxtaposed this fifth suit with yours, because what comes to mind is when I see we create our own reality, now there's a problem. Because that's dangerous.
Well, we do every day. I mean, as we think about the magician card and the eternal moment, we have in every eternal moment, we're making decisions about what our future will be. And we have all the assets.
What comes to mind is there's no container for it. It can go awry. And
Truly.
we need unity. And, you know, it just really resonates. Like, it's all this way of reaching spiritual enlightenment through higher consciousness is all very well, but like, so far it hasn't gone that great. And
I'm sorry, what was your last sentence, Nicole?
Well, so far it's like that. What I sense is, if I really feel into it, is like we've been doing that. You know, we have been doing that for a long time, and in different ways. You know, with organized religion, with people own sort of spiritual seeking and whatnot.
Yeah,
but there's something. There's the missing ingredient is unity in bringing it together, like you know, spirituality.
Right, but
Another element to it,
I do agree with you, Nicole. But at the beginning of life, you've been in a container, namely your mother's womb,
yes,
for the first 9 months, and once you're born, you've lost that container, and so you have to find a new one. I do agree, you have to find a new one, but I don't think it just springs magically at the beginning of life. That's my point.
yeah,
Or at least it's not your responsibility. I mean, when you're an infant, you know, we raise children for 10 to 15 years before we can consider them able to get around on their own. And you know, a lot of, you know, and only 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, people were only living to be 20. And so, yes, they had to become adult much faster. But at the, you know, in this first 2 years of life, the container that you have is the family unit, is your mother and father, who want you to grow into, you know, an oak tree, and they have to protect you enough so that you can grow into it, or somebody's going to come along with a ditch digger and bury you because they want to put up a telephone line there or something like that, right?
Well, and it's much like a snake shedding its coming out of the womb for the infant. The snake shedding its skin, or a crab shedding its shell. And at that point, it's vulnerable. It needs a new, as you said, container. It needs a new exterior that actually self-protects it. And that has to take time to develop.
Right now. Okay. Now, I'm not understanding why I'm not seeing chat on the YouTube channel today.
So the person that did this fifth suit, who are they?
Well, their name is Bakens.
Teressena and Martien Bakens.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, Teressena and Martien Bakens. And the illustrations.
Martien, and maybe Martien.
Martien. Right. And Teressena did the illustrations, and most of her, well, I would say all of her illustrations are quite lovely. It's not that I don't agree with their illustrations, not at all.
One last piece on this one too, if I may. The lotus also grows from the mud, so the light comes out of the darkness.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's a fair enough point.
And that's a birth metaphor. I mean, the infant coming out of the womb would be the light coming out of the dark. When right. you know, your first point.
Okay. Now,
so is the fifth suite one thing, or is it a whole lot of different things that people are inventing? I don't know. Like,
I think this is only the second deck that has incorporated the fifth suit. I couldn't tell you the first one. I know I've seen one, but this is the one that primarily came on the scene to have an actual fifth suit composed or comprised of 14 cards, 10 minors and 4 chords.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry for those that are on the YouTube chat. I had it lost on my screen for a bit tonight, and so now I've found it and I've popped it out, so I will be able to respond over there. But in any case, that's where we are. Okay. Anybody else want to talk about the number one?
I just wanted to comment that her face in this card, she doesn't look very happy. to me. Anyways.
What baby do you know that came into the world happy?
Well, yeah, precisely. But that I think that
Oh yeah, that mouth. You're so right. She has like a bad taste in her mouth, like ew,
Right.
a little
Right.
bitter.
and
Right.
but from the text, I get the idea that it's like a safe road, like a safe journey, when it's not,
That's a good point, because there's a trickster
Right.
going on. Her
Yeah.
mouth tells the whole story. There's literally a bad taste in her mouth, very bitter.
Yeah, and her eyes, it's just kind of like
Yeah, well, looking
You know,
askance a bit.
in pain, I think,
Yeah.
mostly.
Okay, so Gilda makes the comment that there's a direct correlation to the chakra system and the tarot. Hope you can elucidate that. I'm not sure I'm capable of elucidating that tonight.
It seems she's referring to the lotus as the solar plexus, which is the body's fire.
Mhm.
The third eye up top, which is the inner vision, and then the kundalini at its higher octave above the head, going then higher, where then the snaking infinity serpent from the solar plexus to the inner vision to the higher self or higher heart, depending on how you look at that, maybe what she was alluding to, if she could say yay or nay, that was somewhat towards where she was
Right.
going.
And of course, the kundalini is another system for basically covering the same thing. And Dr. Jung did do an entire book on the kundalini. And okay, and Gilda says, no, that's not right. So
She may be alluding, she may be alluding to that the heart and the solar plexus are in the same space. If she could actually speak to that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, we'd love for you to join us, Gilda, so that we can get your wisdom directly, because it's going to be herky jerky if we're doing it through the YouTube channel or through the YouTube chat here. And Cool Ranch has said, was asking some questions about Jungian psychology, about the soul. And I'm not going to get into that tonight because I've done 1,100 videos on Jungian psychology, and you can find plenty about that. Tonight is about the tarot. Gilda says the ether corresponds to the fifth chakra. I need to explain it since it requires cross correlations. Okay, it'd be great if you would do that, Gilda, and we'd love to see you on the Zoom panel. I'm going to stop the. Let's see. Here's Annabelle arrived. Okay, so the problem is when I have the PowerPoint up, I can't see participants arrive, and so I will have to stop the share every so often in order to bring people in, and I hope Gilda will be one of them. In any case, all right, I'm going to go back to the share now. And so other comments on the one before we go on to the two. What I don't hear is a lot of objection to my idea that this is about the beginning of life here.
I have no objection, especially because it's a one, an ace. I mean, you're dealing with an origin story, whether you want to or not.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just an origin into the suit, there's still a birth and death, and now at this point, birth emanation metaphor that's I find wholly appropriate and actually intact very visually in this card.
Right. And I do, I see that part of what I have said in the fifth tarot version part that is, in my opinion, trying to accomplish too much. It's because when we, let's see, when we start talking about the importance of inner vision and we create our own reality and love and bliss, that's pretty complex areas of spiritual and psychological thinking. And so I think that they're just trying to do too much in their description of this particular
If
stage.
I agree, but then turn back on myself to disagree with myself, I can actually shift focus, redirect the scale, and then this suit could also then be not the path of the person so much, it's that the individuated person who then becomes on the path of the shaman.
Right. And so from a reading perspective, I mean, if you're reading as a tarot reader, what they've said is perfectly appropriate, because a reader might reasonably come up with these things and talk about them in a reading. What I think my objective and hope is that we will come more to a psychological understanding or grokking about these things in a Jungian sense, but also I do agree entirely that at different levels, and as it is with all tarot suits, they mean different things at different times of life, depending on who you're reading for. And, so it may come out differently as a reader. And so in that sense, I have no objection. And I agree with Jordan that you can definitely do that. And I'm just trying to,
well, and I'm not even indicating as a reader, I'm indicating as a philosopher and a metaphysicist that this suit then takes the path of the other four suits, but then enters the path of the shaman in regards to a process of initiation at the shamanic level, rather than just the you and I talking today, all of us here today level that runs a higher octave in a very process initiate kind of way.
Right. And I guess I'm hoping for another fifth tarot, another suit that has another deck that has 5 suits, but focuses more on the everyday level. Because when we start talking about shamans, then, we really don't have shamans per se in the United States, except people who are shaman wannabes, okay, who weren't born into the tradition. The shamans are Inuits and and
curanderas, but I think too the shamanic aspect of those who walk in life in the always complete, never finished, but they're comfortable in their own skin, shedding, rebuilding, the process of the snake, its skin shedded, the snake, its skin not missed, that we do that, we molt across life. And in that sense too, I could take this from a visceral, just you and me and everyone here perspective. And here's another process of another suit and how we individuate through transformation.
I agree with that. Certainly.
Can I say something a little bit
please.
quickly, maybe?
Go ahead.
Because this suit, it's giving me like this Hindu aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that happens in countries that know extreme poverty, that is that there is an ability to actually be fulfilled and completely happy, even though you do not have material wealth.
Well, I
Because
certainly agree with that.
yeah, because I think that actually, in the sense that that this meaning is portrayed, like you create your own reality. This, for someone that comes from that kind of background, is really important in the sense of finding joy in a place that you were kind of not supposed to, because we all live in this idea that you have to have material structure to actually be happy and fulfilled. And even though that is very important, there are also ways to be happy even though you don't have that. So I think that the ability of creating reality is more of that, like the possibility.
That's fair enough.
That's a great point, Raquel, where the self is the biggest value and treasure. Anything additional to that is just gravy.
Yeah.
I don't.
I know. I mean that.
I don't think that I know how to say this, put it into words, but there's, and I don't want to get into deep in that. It's just a thought. It's really like superficial, actually. But there's this idea that there is potency in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Like extreme poverty can also create amazing stuff, and wonderful ways of being. And I think that kind of like relates to that.
The whole Job metaphor too. And most mystics don't become billionaires. They become secure in themselves in a way. I mean, a roof over your head is wise, but then the riches aren't really what they're looking for. And Lisa said humility, and that's
right. Well, I certainly agree with that. And I just wanted to mention to the people on YouTube that I temporarily lost the chat on the desktop, but I've gotten back to it now. But the happiest people in the world that I've ever experienced is actually Bangladeshis, and this is the one place in the world where people literally are going down the street with great big smiles on their faces. And it's among the poorest countries in the world. And so I agree with Raquel entirely here. And I'm glad that
Raquel, I've got a folder on my Pinterest site called Presence as Architecture. And 30 to 40% of them are people who have, just dry desert playa wrinkles through the face, and maybe teeth or not, but their eyes, they're so bright, and you can just see the joy of life just right there. And it's as if they themselves are the earth, just brightly shining a sun out of their eyes. So that poverty piece is pretty strong.
Yeah. And Gilda, I'm sorry that I didn't send out a notice this week. I got slammed, so I apologize for leaving you high and dry on that. But anyway, you're here, Gilda. So do you want to make some comments that people can hear? Oh, you have to unmute though if you're going to do it. Okay. All right. Patricia's raising her hand. So, Patricia, why don't you go ahead and you have to unmute to make your point. Okay. I cannot hear you, Gilda.
Gilda seems to be trying.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something in response to what Raquel was just saying, and it's a
go ahead, Eddie.
coincidence.
Hi.
Oh, Gilda, go ahead, please. I remember what I was
I
saying.
have so much to share. That last point about poverty,
Yes.
there's something that I discovered the other day that it blew me away. So everyone, Raquel is actually hitting on it. It is a book that is a real treasure called Meditations on the Tarot, and it's unknown author. And
Yes.
it's a journey into Christian Hermeticism.
Mhm.
And the concept of Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhism, for example, of emptiness is the same as poverty, as it translates as poverty in the Christian theology, because when you have nothing, emptiness is nothing. It's the same as poverty. You have nothing. So when you have nothing, that blew me away.
That would be bliss, I think, in Tibetan
that blew
Buddhism.
me away.
Yeah,
That
the
she mentioned
emptied cup.
that she
Right.
mentioned poverty because it is related in that sense. That the metaphor of it is that you have nothing,
Yeah.
that you're operating on an empty space. So, but it gets translated into the human condition when the human has not, as a collective, has not evolved
Right.
into conditions of poverty. And many of the Christian mystics really took that to an nth degree. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it is related in that way.
Yeah. But of course, the mystics we're talking about were taking vows of poverty.
Exactly.
And as Dr. Edinger pointed out, Christ and Buddha are on two ends of a duality. One is bliss, which is the Buddha, and the other is sacrifice, which is Christ. And so the Buddha is about emptiness, as you say, and Christ is about living yourself, your God image.
Yeah. Now, in the Western civilizations, I'll show my little map here. Okay, this is a map of the chakra colors.
Right.
Okay, the chakra colors are nothing but the way light shows when it goes through something like glass or clouds as a rainbow. So, and we are light beings, essentially. So therefore, they didn't make this up out of nowhere. When the ether is the fifth element, which rules the throat, it rules sound, it rules speech, listening, speaking, reading, writing is all related to language. And it is now that we are mastering what language is all about. Language in individuation, because we write our dreams and then we can look at them and associate and say, oh, and if one does not write, the experience is a whole other complete reality, which is what Raquel was mentioning, that some shamans that are not well educated and so on reach, bliss and light states. But as a collective in the Western society, language is a key, the word is key. And it is a key that the other ones do not master. And so when one writes dreams and you look at the writing, it animates a reality that you can tap. There's hooks, there's this and that. And that is the crown of language. And it's related to the fifth chakra. And that is where we're at right now, where most people are literate, or many in the Western society are, and we're trying to educate people so they can use language. Because without language, you can't communicate. But it's not only speaking, like the Kogi Indians that live in Colombia, they are illiterate, but they speak. It is speaking, listening, writing, reading. Math is using all those functions, which there's two tonsils. This is the last manifestation of duality where we have two sides. When it moves beyond the fifth, it goes to the sixth, which is up here, and it switches in the eyes, ding, and it switches in the brain. So it becomes a complete transformation from the personal human that we've known up to that level. The heart is air. So therefore, we've had the four suits. The root chakra is earth. The second one coming is water. Then comes the solar plexus, which is fire. Then comes the heart center, which is air. And all those we actually experience knowingly on earth to date. Every human being knows about it. Ether is the next one. And not every human being is tapped into that reality, even though they experience it. They cannot manifest or articulate a connection to that reality.
Right. So, Gilda, what is your point vis-a-vis the development of the fifth?
That's
suit?
That's the fifth element. It is the fifth chakra. It's the fifth element.
So you're saying that the whole suit is the fifth element?
No, the fifth element comes up to here, and it is the colors. There are three primary colors. The last primary color is the one in the throat, blue. They are no more primary colors.
Those things I understand as other systems, though, and I'm trying to understand what your point is vis-a-vis a fifth suit of the tarot, which is the topic for tonight.
Because we're moving from the fourth, which is the air. Air is the fourth chakra in the heart. We're moving into constellating.
Okay, so you're saying that the first four suits of the tarot are the first four chakras. Okay.
Yes, they're exactly.
Okay, I follow.
Exactly, and because we didn't evolve as a civilization yet into that other element, which is coming up now, the age of Aquarius. That element is the fifth element, and it correlates to the fifth chakra, which also correlates to ether.
Well, so you mentioned also too, the fifth chakra, the voice is, the fifth chakra is the crown of the voice. So in that sense, the emanation of audibles, of voice, communication, connection becomes another birth, an emanation where then it's more than just the person. So there's...
Oh, yes. It's related to sound, but we know the West experiences mostly life through language. Language embodies sound as well as reading, writing, and listening. So all those things come together, like I like the word quintessence. It's perfect word. Comes together to burst everything that sound is about and ruling the fifth chakra.
That dovetails
move to the next one.
And that dovetails into Skip's infancy and birth of consciousness,
yes.
And participation mystique, and that is then someone, a self, capital S, in context, now not alone in the womb, unaware of the context and the nothingness and the darkness, now out in the light in the world, which those kind of aligns with Skip's three, I think, Jungian bullet points that he contrasted to the ones from the book.
Yes, and there's also, like geometry and everything, they are direct correlations. In that first suit that he showed, red is the root chakra. The first one is red. The opposite of red is green. Green is the color assigned to the heart. Okay.
Right.
The next one coming is orange, and the opposite of that is blue, which is the throat. Okay. So they all have their opposites, which are manifesting. The
Right.
next
So
opposite.
Gilda, I'm with you on the chakras and the Kundalini.
Yeah.
But what goes in number one in the fifth tarot then, in the fifth suit, in your opinion?
Well, is number one the ace? Is that
Yeah,
what
the
it's
ace.
meant to be?
Right. What is the ace of the fifth suit, regardless of whether we call it the
Here you go.
Lotus? Regardless of whether we call it the Lotus or the quints, as I propose, what are you offering in what are you offering as what the number one card, the ace, in the fifth suit should be? What's being expressed there? Are you saying that it's the entire Kundalini? I think that
Well,
may
you
be
see,
an overreach.
well, pictorially, I would have to give it some thought, because in reality, it uses all the senses. When you speak, you use your voice, you sound, it uses your nose, because if you cover your nose, and your eyes also are, so it relates to all of them. It is the last one. So how to put that visually as an ace? How can we visually portray sound in this area? This area is the one that is giving life to the rest of the bottom has already been. So here I see that she puts the lotus in the heart center. The heart center is fourth.
But all right. So my suggestion, though, has been that the ace is really about birth of human life, and when you get that, you get more than sound. You get touch. You get sight, you get sound, you get taste. All these things come upon you all of a sudden. As soon as you're born, all these senses are activated, and they weren't activated before, while you were still in the womb. An hour before, they weren't activated, and you weren't feeling or seeing anything. But all of a sudden, bang! It's all there.
Exactly. So it has to perhaps be related in an abstract form, because in its raw form, that will belong to wands or something, to the element of earth, to element of earth. The first chakra, the element is earth.
Okay, but the point that I was making earlier was that we can identify the element of earth as being of interest to many species. Okay, and so my point is that the fifth suit is the quintessence, which is beyond all other species except the human species.
Language.
Right.
It's language.
But other creatures have a language.
They don't know. They cannot reflect on their language. They only make sounds and communicate, but they're not able to write it, read it.
Well, I agree with that, right? And
then that's a mirror.
But also,
it's like a mirror.
When we're born, okay, I'm trying to get us through psychological development here. So when we're born, we also can't read, write, or communicate, except by crying about our discomfort when we're born. And so I'm just trying to understand from your point of view, first of all, am I wrong about the fifth suit, or what should we be calling the fifth suit?
Well, it is a distilled essence. By the time it gets there, all the other essences have been distilled into a finer essence.
Right.
Okay. Can I comment something? Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking there's two ideas that Gilda had bring today that I really like, and I would like to share some experience that I'm practicing, or a practice I'm having. The thing is that she talked about the surgeon of language, we can say it, or a new way to communicate and make connections. And she also talked about dreams and how dreams can help you also to make connections. And lately, well, not lately, like 2 months ago, I began to make drawings of my dreams. And what I have found is that when you make a drawing, not just writing your dream, but when you make a drawing, the final thing, it becomes like a tarot card, because you can analyze the symbols, you can see what colors did you use. And I don't know, it's my personal practice, but I am finding connection with what Gilda just said about a new language. I don't know, I just found that interesting.
Yeah, it is a new language, but we're trying to get to it. And the thing is, let me cut to the end here so that we know where the objective is. So the objective in the fifth tarot that actually we have a set of cards on is the end card is enlightenment. Okay. And so what Gilda is talking about is an accordion squeeze on everything that goes between human birth and enlightenment. And what I'm trying to explicate here is first what they say the steps are, and then observe my observation and see what others say about what the steps are from the beginning, whatever the beginning is, to enlightenment. So, I concur that Kundalini is a path toward enlightenment. Okay, there are many paths toward enlightenment. And so I'm just trying to get 14 steps in place, and then we can talk about how they all fit together.
Okay,
I would say I would be remiss if I didn't say that Patricia's comment about taking down dreams, making them like an oracle card, is just a direct alignment, Skip, with your Participatio Mystique.
Yeah,
where
fine.
what comes out is you read it like an oracle card. And that's a wonderful point, Patricia.
Surely. Okay.
I would
So
offer
that
Could we go to the two?
there's a mirroring that goes on because we understand language. If you didn't have language to access it as a mirror image, it would never happen. So the language,
Participation Mystique
exactly.
is.
So the language allows one to mirror the reflection, and that is a distillation which is much higher than living any of the singularities that come in the four suits. It includes them all, and it uses them all to come to the next transcendence. It's a distillation, like distilling liquor, whatever.
Yeah.
And it involves language, because language comes out of the throat. Reading, listening, writing, speaking, all of them together.
Okay, well, let's go on to number 2, and we'll keep amplifying what you're saying to us, Gilda, so that we will all understand. So this is the 2 card, and in the 5th tarot, the tarot is empathy, and it's one who can enter feeling or spirit of feeling of another, and connection to the divine source, transcends individual feelings, and unconditional love of the creator. Now, my take is that this 2 is, in the human being, is mother and child, basic spiritual awakening, the first experience of the goddess in a Western way of thinking about it. So I will shut up and ask you all to comment.
I would share that in my estimation, a number 8 is the symbol of infinity, which is very clearly drawn there, which is what goes on right here at the brow center. So it's about integrating male and female or opposites of duality, opposites, male, female, whichever one you want. Once that is integrated and becomes it becomes a transcendent function that allows compassion and everything else to be seen
Right,
for what it is.
so how do you express that in a card? If you had to put it down in a card, what would you do?
See, I don't have this deck, so I haven't been able to study how I would physically
If I may,
portray.
I have a card right in front of me, and to me, we started with the Lotus, and the heart is the green, as Gilda has so aptly pointed out. The heart is the green. People say that's strange. Is it growth? No, it's verdant. It's the basis of life. So now in this card, the two Lodi or Lotus are both sitting on their lily pad green hearts. And if you look at the heart at the center, the heart of the matter visually of the card, there are actually two hearts. A red one, or fuchsia-ish pink, and then a green one turned upside down the other way. So at the intersection there,
Exactly.
the two hearts each have a pair of lobes. When you flip one over the other, you now have 4 lobes. So there comes your birth of consciousness in terms of the actuation, the differentiation of conscious beginning. I think this card actually pretty clearly visually addresses that question.
It's also bringing to light that the pink and the green are both there. When we see actually red, or this is a form of red, we see red, we never see the green that's behind it. If it wasn't there, we wouldn't see red. And this card brings very clearly that both are being seen.
Yes, that's a good point.
The front and the back. So they're both, it's the unity of transcendence. We bring what we can't, the dark side of the moon, to rise to luminosity.
Well, and then to take that and dovetail into Skip's point of the mother and child, at this point with the two, the actual infant is birthed to differentiate from the womb, to differentiate into life.
It's realized. 2 is the realizing
number. That's a good word.
Right, and certainly empathy is involved there, because the mother has tremendous empathy for the child, no doubt about that.
Well, and then the child begins to feel, which is the seed of empathy.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, without the mirroring quality of the emotions, the child dies. There's a test that they've done on children in orphanages. They did a test of baby. They would just give them the bottle, feed the baby, and never associate with the baby, and the baby dies. So it needs the reflection. Otherwise, it cannot grow. And here,
that happened in the 16th century too. A monastic group, and I'm not sure who, and with a certain royalty line, decided what is the most primary natural language. So they took 20 or 25 infants, separated them from their mothers and their fathers, and isolated them with the nuns, and they were not allowed to be touched. They were only fed, not allowed to be talked to, no words, to see which language would come out first as the end all be all language. Nothing happened. They all died.
Yeah, they died. There's no mirroring.
There was no touch of language. There was no touch of, as Skip, you say, the breast that goes into the mouth, and here's some food. None of that occurred. And all of them, not without fail, perished.
Yeah, exactly. We have mirroring neurons. It's called mirroring neurons.
Mirroring neurons.
Yes, and without that, we reflect. That's how we are alive. We reflect and we project.
Right. So one of my objectives here is to point out how the pioneers have done it and how they've expressed the second card. And I'm looking at it from a Jungian point of view. And as we all know, there are literally hundreds of tarot decks from all kinds of points of view, from there's a vampire tarot deck.
I think it's approaching 5,000 right now. But go ahead.
All right. 5,000 different perspectives on the tarot. And so by this evening, my purpose is only to point out here are two ideas, and the rest of you are presenting other ideas. And any future tarot deck maker who is going to do a fifth suit is going to have to think through these issues somehow. And, I don't have a final answer. I don't think the Bakens, the Bakens have a final answer. They have courage, but they don't have a final answer. And so we're just trying to give ideas about what these things can represent and what the imagery could be. And it occurred to me that I might be able to get a tarot deck created on my own basis at some point in the future last night, but
I have a question.
Soon. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if anybody would comment on the first card and this one, if you were to illustrate empathy and incorporate these things that Skip has on the right hand side, what would the visual be for you?
For me, I would put Madonna and Child as a good example, but
For the two card?
That's a wonderful question, because I would actually put the Lotus, if I was to revise this card, I would put the Lotus on one side and I would put nothingness on the other side to eliminate the mirroring, eliminate the projection. And empathy is actually a dispassionate but complete feeling connected to feeling what another is feeling, but without taking it on. Because there is a non, and there is a capital O other quality to empathy. That's a great question, Tammy.
Yes, it's a transcendent function, whatever that is from the original
Right.
two and all the other tarots. If you look at what would make a transcendent function out of the regular one, there you would have it.
well,
Or I would replace one of the lodi with a face, so that the human sees the inner lotus, or vice versa, creating.
Mhm.
Okay.
What do others have to say?
I mean, that's assuming that you're going to buy in on the Lotus as the name of the suit.
Well, no, actually not. I would call it educated symmetry, where to me it's two things across an axis, same position, different things. So whether I change it into 1,000-petal lotus, or to a bright brain, or to a star, or something symbolic there, I would just think an object on one of the lemniscate, the figure 8 interiors, and a nothingness on the other one.
Mm.
Okay. When you say the other one, do you mean on the two things of this card, or are you speaking about the first card too?
No, looking at, if you take it as a figure 8, I mean, I'll
Okay.
drop the lemniscate word, the infinity symbol, the figure 8. Then to me, there are two selves in a way, like a cell differentiated, but two selves, SELVES.
Okay.
So there's two interior points that have a lotus on the top above the pink red heart, and a lotus on the bottom below the green upside down heart. And what I would do is I would leave one and erase the other. Now, I'm not sure which one, because then I could go into an argument about, well, does the red or the green do that? And which is more higher octave? And there's where my enigma probably would not ever crack. And I would get stuck or just have to make a decision. But it seems to me that there would be something within the core of one of those swirls and nothing in the core of the other one. And one, to me, kind of secondary reason there is, to me, if you take a big rubber band and you make it into a circle and you then twist it, it's the figure 8. So I always look at the figure 8 not as two things. I look at it as a circle that has been influenced to become more than just round and round and round. Now it's doing this figure 8. There's some inertia and some centrifugal force psychologically, I think, that goes into the movement. The infinity symbol seems to be an evolved circle to me, one that has just been twisted. So it's a bit influenced as you move, for example, to the 2.
I have
In
a few
short.
things I'd like to say about this card, and also related to, it turns out it relates to what Raquel was saying before. What I see in this card is a lotus in the water reflected in the water. So it's only the part of the lotus that emerges above the water. And there's a Tibetan prayer that I say at least once every day that includes a portion about the lotus. And the lotus there has to do with how the lotus's roots go down into that dark, wet, kind of complicated place. And often what the lotus is growing up from is really swampy and toxic and has a lot of problems, so that the lotus is representing the possibility of emerging with full beauty, integrity, wholeness, and a kind of diverse, right, the way the blossom is formed, but coming from this place that it doesn't really matter how bad that was in the beginning or how dirty and complicated and whatever. So that relates to the response that I wanted to make to Raquel about the first card and the notion of poverty, and how today I had a coincidence that I felt related to what Raquel was saying and some of what is being talked about with this deck. It's the International Day of the Woman today. And at the place where I work, there's a woman who was raised in Jamaica, and she's called our Director of Diversity and some other stuff, justice and all that kind of stuff. It's a new department in the company. And she grew up with a woman in a very poor community in Jamaica, who now is chaplain to Queen Elizabeth and who is a bishop. And she is the first female bishop and first Black bishop in the Anglican Church. So this woman, Bishop Rose Hudson Wilkin, spoke with us, which is to say the people of the company. And she was asked a question about this kind of like concept of reaching enlightenment. She didn't answer too many questions. She was only posed maybe 4. Mostly she talked kind of generally. But she said, look, you know, whatever you want to achieve, it's not like, she said, she was a person who believed when she was very, very young that she was on a path to serve other people with spirituality and faith and all that. And she just stuck with it. And she was saying the poverty that she grew up in was an asset, and that the joys that she had when she had holes in her shoes, or when, you know, she lived in, you know, kind of tin shack kind of situation, it was not greater than what she has now and what she sees when she goes to Buckingham Palace and is talking with the Queen. So this kind of parity, and the fact that our path, the notion of poverty or wealth, is actually on an equal plane when we're on a spiritual path. So that kind of, there's the vertical of the lotus coming from, let's call it troubled childhood or troubled whatever it is, into this beauty, and then poverty to wealth being on a plane.
You made a wonderful, beautiful point there. That across the board, that questionable dark roots locate. I mean, and start to finish. Thank you that's a beautiful expression of that.
Okay, we're going to have to speed it up a little bit if we're going to even get through the first 10 here, because it's already 9:11. So let me go on to number 3 here.
I have an idea for your images that just came to me.
Okay.
Your mother and child.
Mhm.
It's a fair enough image. You would only need to display it in a way which perhaps has the robe, if you use the colors of the chakras, you'll be doing well. The body is not so visceral, but maybe the robes or whatever it is shows them to be more ethereal. But you can still use the image of the mother and a child, except where they look more ethereal. Perhaps the gravity, they're not seated like the usual, they either seated or, in that way, if you just
Right,
change.
because I think what we're talking about here, and then what I'm talking about in number 2 is a very early stage of consciousness.
Right.
Okay.
So it's got to be this openness and whatever else, however else you manage that, but not so visceral.
Right.
Well,
so
and to visually extend Annabelle's wonderful idea of the lotus mirrored in the water, then you could have the mother as kind of a ghostly apparition, and the baby is infant, very, very clear, because you have then the reflection of the mother in the past, so to speak. And then you have that which is new, the lotus above the water, as Annabelle mentioned, with that mirroring, which is a wonderful image.
Right. And that's, of course, what participation mystique is.
Yes,
so
right, yeah.
Number 3, so the fifth Tarot mentions there's 3 layers: underworld, surface, and heavens. It's we're multi-dimensional beings, points that out to us. Quantum physics, we existed in multiple realities, which is definitely true. And our consciousness binds us to this plane, whatever this plane is. I don't know. Now, in fairness, they write at least 2 or 3 pages about each one of these cards. And so I've just essentialized some of the basic ideas that they present, so that you can have a flavor for it. And so anyway, they've shown 3 lotuses here. The way I view it from a human consciousness point of view is father awareness. In other words, a third person. And it represents the family unit, and it represents parents as God. So this is Jung's second stage of consciousness. Where we see our parents as gods. And as I've said, when I was almost 6 years old, I saw my mother as a god. I didn't have words for it at that time. I saw her, and I was aware that I was in the car with a goddess. I couldn't have described it to you as that when I was 6 years old, but now that I'm 75, I can look back on that moment and say that's what I saw at that time. And so we get to this stage in childhood where we go beyond the participation mystique, and we start seeing our parents as gods. And we become aware for the first time about the dark side. Father comes in, and father has edges, right? And so we start being presented with fear and guilt, and coupled with strength and protection. So father is both strong, and he's protecting us in the family. I mean, ideally, I'm not talking about always, but ideally that's what father would do. But he also uses fear and guilt tripping to get you to behave in the way that he wants. That's the father's role, probably. Okay, so.
But isn't the 3 a sort of celebration? 3 is an activation number, 2 is a realizing number, and 3 is an activation number. So doesn't it carry some celebratory?
Well, being aware of the family unit would be celebratory. Seeing your parents as gods is celebratory.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
it carries a celebration of some kind.
I'd like to lend a darker side. The 2 parent Lotus, one, these are no longer pink or red. They've changed. They're white. And then the one on the top in the middle ostensibly could be in a tidal pool of water, hanging out with a kind of ease. The water's kind of still and maybe eddying. But the one on the bottom, it's rooted in moving water. It's no longer Annabelle's beautiful mirror where it's the roots going down into still mucky murk. That's rooted in a waterfall. So the darkness, the depths seem to be empowering themselves or growing here, because it's not just hanging out on a ledge, it's in the waterfall. So those roots, it's rooted in moving water.
Right.
I also observed that the biggest lotus is actually where the flow is happening. And that is allowing that the other 2 become also lotuses, which are higher up. That's the biggest amount of flow. And it's very centered, just like the Shushuma, the central channel of our bodies.
Right. So I do want to point out that when I was doing my takes, I wasn't referring to their cards. Okay. So I don't mean to suggest by my takes that I'm commenting on the Bakens cards per se.
Right. You're playing out the quintessence from a contrast perspective to see how they dovetail or dance, right?
From a psychological development point of view. Okay.
So somehow you would need to show this family unit as a central channel where flow develops and into these 3 things.
Sure.
Well, up to this point in these cards, on the first one, we have the lotus and the third eye, and then above the crown chakra. Then we have the lotus and the heart and the lotus. And then here we have lotus and lotus and lotus. So in the first 3 cards, there's really a trinity metaphor visually that's really powerful, just pretty overtly running through these cards. So I think back to your family unit, parents as gods, first awareness of darks, that's all fitting into this card.
Yeah. Other comments? Go ahead, Raquel.
I think that idea of seeing parents as gods is really powerful, because I think that is the door to fear and guilt. Because once you realize that your parents are powerful in the first place, the first place you can be like glad and happy because they are on your side. But that can quickly become something to fear, So I think that last part, fear and guilt coupled with strength and protection, it's a very contradictive feeling, I think, to have, even especially towards your parents, that I think it's kind of natural to happen. And regarding the image itself, I think that's very important that this is being portrayed as a waterfall, because it's a drop. And even though this waterfall means to be harmonic in some way, something is going loose, and like something is going away, and the flow is taking that away. So it's emotion based, everything. So I think that the idea is everything that you go through in this moment, it's always going to be on emotional level, and not fear, guilt, strength, and protection. I think that's very important, because it's all emotions in some sense, and you cannot, you're not in the place that you can create a separation from that. You have to live through that. So something will have to go, you know.
That's a really good point, with especially that fear and guilt coupled with strength and protection. I mean, there's the whole capital M mentor / capital T tormentor, that both of them are the parent, and the mentor tormentor of the parent. That really speaks to that, Raquel.
I think Brandon wants to say something.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Raquel, 2 or 3 times you've used that couplet, strength and protection. And it's interesting because the most famous English translation of St. Thomas Aquinas's prayer from the 13th century, called the Anima Christi, the soul of Christ, uses that same couplet. And the couplet is used in this sense, in this sentence. It says, strength and protection, may thy passion be. So
may thy passion be?
Yeah. So may the final 3 days of suffering and death of the Christ be the strength and protection of my life. And every time you've mentioned that, Raquel, my brain, because it's a hymn that we sang, you know, I'm a musician, a church musician. Every time you said strength and protection, I immediately went to that place, which is, thank you. I thank you for that, because it's something for me to think about. It's also something for you to think about, that you, and you allude always to strength, meaning protection. It's an interesting thing. But Skip has just also opened a memory for me, which I had kind of forgotten. My mother was a working mum, and she worked in London, which was a 2-hour commute from home. So basically, she was an absent mother, and you saw her on Saturdays and Sundays. But my dad, I remember crawling into our washroom where my dad, who was a stay-at-home dad, did all the laundry, and hearing him sing and do the laundry, because to entertain himself, to make life less burdensome, he used to sing his head off, which is why I'm a musician now, because he was a fantastic singer. And I remember looking up to him and having the same experience that you had, Skip, with your mum in the car, and thinking, I am in the presence of a titan. I am in the presence of a giant, of a god.
Surely.
Which also, in a very deep, unconscious place, informed then my relationship with him, which was very stormy in teenage years and my 20s, and didn't really resolve itself until my 30s and 40s.
Yeah, give me a chance to get up to card number 6 or 7, number 7. But anyway, I just wanted to add, I added here that Trinity is introduced here because it's, you know, the parents, the children, and the Holy Spirit, which is your sense of your spirit, the spirit of the family, if you will. In this case, perhaps. And, you know, you can say that Christ is with you if you want to, that's fine. But the idea is that the spirit is somewhere, and it exists in this family unit. And so, so this idea of the family members, the elder, the younger, and the spirit of the family is introduced here, whether you call it, you know, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost in the Christian sense or whatever, but this is the idea of the Trinity.
You know, Skip, when you put the Trinity introduced at the bottom, I all of a sudden looked up and went, you know, Father awareness and the Trinity introduced are actually sub-bullets of the family unit, as if with father awareness, the family unit has the trinity induced, or the family unit, upon father awareness, the trinity is introduced. They're just, those three seem to be, ironically, three, one heading, two subs, they subsets, they seem to just function there rather than
on father awareness, there is a Holy Ghost. There is a spirit that is there, whereas only between mother and child, there's not really a spirit there. There's a give and a take, and a very physical thing. But once you introduce the third party into the family unit, then there's something else that comes up, which is unconscious.
Well, and that's a wonderful irony with the father being, at that point, the Holy Ghost, but in reality, the Holy Ghost is typically a feminine anima, kind of the original bride, co-creator of everything with God. I mean, I don't think there are three males in the Trinity. It's like Father, Son, and, well, the Holy Ghost is veiled. We don't know. But I think the implication is often more like in the lines of Sophia or Shekinah, maybe even.
Right. Yeah, and just so everybody knows, I'm getting a flashing thing every so often on my screen that is indicating that there's chat going on the Zoom. But at this time, while I'm screen sharing, I cannot see the chat. So if I'm not if I'm not responding to your chat, that's why. Okay, the number 4. So for the Bakens, this is crystallization, and it's the larger family unit. The we-they idea comes up. Keeping others in the dark, all for one and one for all is the way I put it. And I'm essentializing some of their ideas. And so the crystal earth keeper, and I put the word omerta, which is a mafiosa idea of, you're either in the family or you're not. Right. And so the Bakens didn't use that term, but I did. Okay. And so
that's wonderfully inclusive of you.
And so my takes are that this is an awareness of belonging, a differentiation from others, awareness of a larger spiritual family, might be additional children, and also it's a stage where we realize that God is outside the house, and the traditional religious education and commitments come into force in the human species, and so this is the stage of consciousness where we become aware that God is not mom and dad. It's actually something else, which the minister or the priest is going to tell us about, or the rabbi. And so this is the third stage of consciousness from a Jungian perspective. Comments?
What is the drop? What did they say that drop in the center signifies?
I don't know.
Because I see that as important, meaning that the 4 is where, remember in the tarot deck where they show the cup over here, but he's not looking at it, right? It's the embodiment of the manifestation where you manifest a transcendent function. Since this is the 5th suit, you are aware that there is a transcendence from where you have been.
Okay, well, I think we're going to get into transcendent a little later in this deck, but yeah, fine.
That's a good point,
Right.
Gilda, about that tear or water drop. I mean, it could be the water of life. It could be the first instance of pain, because you do notice the splash in the water below. So it's obviously occurred already. It's not the first tear or first water of life. I'm looking in the book to see what they say too.
Skip, I'm interested in that. Well, your takes are more inclusive, I think, but the takes on the left, I don't know who wrote those interpretations on the left.
Well, those are my essentialization of what the Bakens say. I can't say that they would endorse my essentialization of their deck, but that's the way I did it in a short period of time.
But at least 50% of them give the impression that you're not with us, so you must be against us.
Yeah.
And now that I'm realizing that you're not, Skip's takes the awareness of belonging. When you say differentiation from others, you're not saying necessarily that others are a threat or that others are to be held at a distance.
Right. I mean, or different levels of that, of course, because it's awareness of belonging to a family, to a congregation, to a religion or a specific denomination of a religion. There are many different ways of thinking about that. And there would be, in a divination, there would be other ways of talking about it by the reader. And so I'm not saying that my essentialization here is the end all be all, not by any means.
Brendan, you bring up a wonderful point there, though, because it's not necessarily conflict. It's the post-differentiation that makes the indication of capital I identity. I mean, I now understand that I may not be disconnected, but I'm separate, and that I know that I can see outside myself. And in a sense, nihilism and solipsism just disappear at that point in a normal individual.
Yes. And while in the second stage, the identification of there being others out there and me being separate and me not being able to mimic or me not being able to come up to my my projections of the awesome power, awesome goodness, awesome whatever plane you like to say about it, of the other, of the gods.
Right.
Nevertheless, this third stage doesn't necessarily imply that I am worse than, I am better than. It doesn't make a judgment call. So I'm not threatened. I'm not threatened by the other. That's what I like. A good child should not be feeling threatened. That's why you have to say to kids, don't talk to strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Because the natural,
and that's
the actual inclination of children is when they get to the second stage is, wow, all adults are gods.
Yeah.
And,
right. Well, and you make the case there that, you know, it's capital I identity is now on the scene. It's not good or bad. It's not conflict or peace. It's just there is identity that is now present.
Right.
Which is a very four concept. I mean, it's a baby emperor, you know, establishing place within oneself.
Okay, let's give Gilda a chance here. Gilda.
I just want to throw in there that because this is the fifth suit, that there's something called mind object. And in this book that I share, Merit, calls that things like any kind of tradition is simply what it is because it is contained in a type of psychological object that we embody as being true. And since this is a suit, and here that tier just kind of keeps telling me something, that they realize that perhaps this container is an object, and it's an object that also has outer possibilities of something else.
Right, and the Bakens have realized that the tarot was not fully containing or containing adequately the development of the human species. After 600 years, there's something more needed.
That's a good point. And the snowflake, I mean, every snowflake is unique, except every snowflake we still call a snowflake. So in a sense, the snowflake could be the water of life that is asleep, frozen. And in that place, then you introduce dreams.
Right. And so when we're bringing up children, of course, they have to believe in a religion because that's all they have. You know, they either believe it or they don't, but most kids believe what their parents tell them, especially when they're young, right?
Well, yeah, it's like when you finally figure out Santa Claus, remember what they told you in church, and then apply the same philosophy to that.
Now, can you imagine the reverse? I was told not to believe what I heard in school and so on because it was a switch of government. So I grew up not believing. And that is a real trip.
Right, but that in itself is a belief.
Right. Even the whole God is an atheist argument. When, you know, someone says, well, God, no one created you. And he says, well, right. And you go, so you don't believe in God? Oh, I guess you got me. I mean, you know, it's like, it's.
Okay. So Patrick Hollywood says, I always thought adults were annoying when they spoke to me in a funny voice since I was little. Laugh out loud. I never viewed them as gods. Rather, they didn't realize how smart little kids were.
Nice. I like that a lot.
All right. So we're going on to number 5 here. Okay. So this is shape-shifting. And so the Bakens have it. The number 5 is shape-shifting, and it's blending with the energy in medicine from the animal realm that's relating to instinct and transforming the self into a beast. Illustration of a moral story, learning to adapt to change, and first wisdom. My take on it is this is kind of the teenage years, doubt for everything and everyone. And it relates to the way we've treated religion, where everybody became an atheist or an agnostic during, not everybody, but a lot of people became atheists or agnostics in the 20th century after Nietzsche announced God is dead. And so the human species in the West sort of got into these teenage years where everybody was doubting everything and everyone, and we're still in that largely. And so there's rebellion to authority, and both inner and outer authority. Beginning of the sadder but wiser stage of life as you get through your teenage years. You know, girls may hate their mothers in their teenage years, but they might think she's their best friend by the time they're 30, type of thing. Men may think that their father is dumb or not very smart, but later on they think their father is wise. So overpowering energies driven by instinct, spiritual needs are not being met at this stage. And so comments.
Everybody?
Silence. We'll move on.
Well, I'll go. I don't want to dominate everything and just jump out ahead too much. The shape-shifting here thing, I mean, graphically, I mean, the deer antler with a fox half face and the woman's face and the bald eagle with the silver, I mean, the white head, except what's interesting here is then the 3 feathers and then 2 wings. There are 5 there. But what's interesting to me is in metaphysical circles too, the person who has a silver streak of hair, it's typically a sign of higher sight or high intuition. And just historically it has been. And that that goes with the beginning of the sadder but wiser stage of life, where that streak appears, that bald eagle becomes her hair, which is the ability to shapeshift, which is basically the ability to move through worlds. And 5 is a capital N nature number. And then they're your overpowering energies driven by instinct. And then they're learning to adapt to change. And as you essentialize them, the first wisdom. I mean, this is where you are now. In a sense, I would say this would be, you're pushed out into the wild. And, you know, if you live for 3 or 4 days, come on and come back. But if you don't, then we'll see you never. I mean, the initiation rite of pushing someone into the wilds feels to be at least presaged here, if not the story of that coming later is starting to be told here.
Right.
Jordan, it also talks about your ability to be open to those other realms, the ability to how the connection that you can make with animals, with plants, with crystals, I think. But what you said, it's really how I understand this card. But also, I will just add that we the need to be open to the communication with those other realms.
That's a really important point, because also too, you're walking out into nature and you now have an understanding of how intense it'll kill you, of how intense it is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you're very open to just how intense anything is, rather than making it easy or hard or nice or bad or anything like that.
Yeah. So Brendan, go ahead.
I was never able, and this is a sad thing. You said it's the beginning of the sadder but wiser stage of life. To me, that I find that particularly poignant, Skip, only because one of the things you said was you always thought, you know, there was a competition. You always thought your dad was dumb, but then when you get older, you realize that in fact he's got tremendous wisdom. Well, I never got to that stage, Skip. I never got to the stage. The rebellion to my dad was never resolved because he was unable to show any kind of affection to me, unable to show any kind of acceptance or, you know, so I never got to the stage, even in his older life, even though he admired the work that I was doing, I never thought he was tremendously wise. So that will, to the day I die, unfortunately, I don't know how, you know, one resolves these things, be part of my maturing journey. My spirit, as you say at the bottom, Skip, spiritual needs not met. It's just something I'm going to have to live with.
Right. And Justin Case says, people became atheists also because science and technology were capable of delivering miracles to improve their material living standards, while God seemed to be absent in action. And I think that, you know, the point is certainly well taken, but I think our problem became that the religions were selling an expectation about God that didn't sell, it didn't wash anymore, and you know, God isn't there for that purpose, to fulfill our wishes per se. Okay, I mean, I'm going to read to you a little piece at the end of this that relates to a talk that we're going to have on the wisdom path sometime soon, I hope. But anyway, go ahead.
In that card, that like others said, the importance that whatever is arising, that being knows that there's another side to it, because it's very split right in the middle.
Right.
So it fluctuates, experiencing the different sites,
right,
and trying to make some.
Right. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks, Gilda. I always love hearing your reflections, Gilda. They're really beautifully. They just really, yeah, resonate. What came to mind is there any I think this is really significant because, or is anyone sort of getting any kind of stream about the fact that this is the 5th card and we're doing the 5th element?
Not yet. At least I'm not yet.
This is the 5th card. So
Right.
That's why I brought up the rite of passage of the going into the wild seems to be there's a once upon a time. The story's not being told, but it feels like it's presaged, prefigured starting here. And I think that's the 5th card and the 5th suit is a little nature amongst the big nature has started to poke up its non-head, as it were, existentially.
Well, to me, I see I think I see the resemblance that Nicole is saying about the 5th card and the 5th suit, because number 5 in numerology always speaks about transformation. And I think it's very interesting that the animals that were chosen to be here are, most of them are hunters, except the butterfly in some way. So I think it's maybe related to survival. This is why, most of the animals are hunters and carnivores in a sense. And the butterfly still in her heart, as in the first card and in the Ace of Lotus. So it's a transformation, but keeping something that relates to the heart.
Right.
That's a good point too. The fox, because the fox itself, when foxes are born, they mew, and then as they grow, they learn to bark. So there's the feline to the canine, but they have dogs' paws with cats' retractable claws. So even on that one side, there's a trickster animal there.
But there's also this antler I see back there that no one is paying attention to.
That comes out of the fox's head, right?
But it's an antler that belongs to deers. That means she's growing an antenna. They're growing an antenna to that relates to other worlds that are beyond the immediate composition of being right in their bodies. I mean, it's very prominent. It's got three little offshoots, but we don't see the deer. We only see the antlers, and that's what you call it's an antenna that can pick up signals from somewhere else.
Yeah,
that makes sense, because then the antler is bone, and it becomes actually an externalized, differentiated skull extension. So in a sense, the antenna brains out into the world.
Right. Okay, let's move on. Number 6. So the Bakens say universe reverberates with Om, and we sense the depth that comes from the source. We call on the source to light the way for us. Universal thought and form flow through ethers and connect to our true spiritual essence. Now, for me, this description of this card was a bit too airy-fairy for me, I have to admit. And so my take is one has first numinous experiences at this stage, commitment to a traditional religious form, bonding to a profession, one's own family, spiritual awakening is felt as a need, and acceptance of the world as it is, recognition of something more. And so the basically spirituality got written out of the 20th century. And now, as we see, there's spirituality everywhere trying to come back, and it will come back because it's a need, and it's within all of us. However, it comes back. And so, anyway, that's my comment. And in the 5 stages of psychology, of spiritual development, psychic development, the 5th stage would be after having written off the traditional religions, we now look back to them to see what they have and what they actually brought to us, so we can do a better job of using them in the future for our lives. Anyway, others?
I'll just share about Om. Om is a complete sound. That's why the circle is complete. It comes out from underneath, and it comes out until it's full, and then the mouth closes in the M. It encompasses all sounds. So it's definitely a completion of sorts, and related to from the bottom up and out into a manifestation of sound.
And to piggyback there, the AUM, Om, is the 4-character voice of the universe. And the 4th character is the silence between and all around the AUM. It's curious to me that they amputated the Om glyph symbol, unless they're implying that the circle mandala is the other part of because the Om kind of usually looks like a 30, and there's the calligraphic glyph portion that's more circular on the right that's missing here. Maybe it's vestigial, maybe it's growing.
So also the swirls in the background imply vibration. There's movement and spiraling vibration. And we actually carry that in our being in order to transform. It's not just something static, but there's a force that spirals and vibrates.
That's a good point. This is like a spiral nebula of self.
Okay, other comments? I cannot see everybody that's in the group, so speak up if you want to talk. Let's see. This is a way that I can go back and forth through seeing people. Okay, that's not.
We like her use or their use of the blue color, and color is something that you might consider when you're doing your deck, which follows in the chakras as a linking theme throughout the development of your pictures.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Okay.
This is where I am right now. I'm at stage 6. I'm at card 6. That's what I'm living out of right now. This one.
Yeah.
It's a strong place, Brendan.
Yeah, sure.
Am I in the wrong group?
No, that's a strong place. The 6 is a wonderful exchange number. In a sense, I always find the 6s to be kind of a Rome. All roads lead to Rome. There's a reciprocal quality, both good and bad, but also there, even though painful, it can often be balance. So in a sense, the 6s are very nourishing from a divination standpoint. And just from a numerology standpoint here, if you look at the literal symmetry, there is balance above and below around this, but there's also a space between. So there's 2 trinities that in a sense are coming together and giving themselves space.
Well, it's the doubling of an experience that one of them has already been and the other one is being celebrated. So it creates a wholesomeness in the experience.
Could you speak to that, Brendan, about how, because that's a powerful statement of this is where you are.
All I would say, Jordan, is, as I just put on the public chat room, I feel like now is a great time to be alive. It's not ambrosia, it's not real easy, but it's a great time. Every day I wake up with a simple gratitude to be alive, and almost with every encounter, be it on my phone or in person with other people, I have a sense of consolation which increases my gratitude, or I have a sense of conflict which increases my question, which increases my need for personal growth. Every experience, every encounter is a teacher. And I'm going to say half of them are hugging me and the other half are giving me a dope slap.
They're giving you a what?
A dope slap.
Oh,
No.
I see.
Yeah. It's like the doping mechanism to dial something down. It's like, yeah, I love that phrase. It's like, yeah, it feels like it's building quite a sanctuary of both. Thank you for that.
And Gilda, were you trying to say something there? Sorry. No, okay. This is the problem of trying to go between the YouTube, which is 40 to 50 seconds behind us, and Zoom. So, okay, here's the 7. And so divine blueprint is what they call the 7. And so they say it's recognition of all as energy, intimations of a divine blueprint, soul's communion with the cosmos in a physical body, and intuition of self-healing and consciousness of life force energy. So what I said is it's the end of the hero's journey, wondering what's next, where do I go now? Does my family really need me? This is probably from a masculine point of view. The need for creativity is important, it seems to me, at this stage. And creation outside the family, build a church, lead a Masonic lodge, paint a picture, learn macrame. Those are my thoughts on that. Comments? Go ahead, Gilda.
Okay, we'll offer that as in any kind of blueprint. There are paths that you traverse in the blueprint in order to get from A to B. Mm-hmm. And one goes back and forth in that plane. And this card suggests, for example, the map that you have when you're born of your astrological connections, aspects, things, they're always moving around. But in reality, when you transcend that, which you made reference to that, you build up this transparent, comes out of all those lines that you have traversed. So something rises and creates in a transparent way a new form, which is like a crystal. So you no longer are tied to walking up and down the blueprint that it's on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You have edified up and it looks like something else. It doesn't no longer looks down at a blueprint. It looks like something else that is created in the space that it's that's
right.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say end of the hero's journey, I mean the end of Star Wars Episode 4, where okay, you've completed all the tasks, maybe not all, because Luke Skywalker hadn't had a family yet, but at halfway through life, you've achieved a profession, you've raised a family if you're going to, and all those things are part of the hero's journey. But then when the children start leaving the nest and you're only 40 or 45, or let's say if you're in the Navy and you're a 45-year-old captain of an aircraft carrier, now it's time for retirement from the Navy and you're 45 years old. Oh my gosh, what do you do now? Got another 50 years to live. And so, that's what the wondering is about, and you need something. And, maybe it's still the family in some way, but it is probably something outside of you too. Okay.
It leaves the floor plan. It's no longer the floor plan. The lines have come up and created a shape. It create a shape in the spheres, in the cosmos.
Right.
Out of that same pattern, but you're no longer that pattern anymore. You have moved up and created a manifestation in the cosmos that has left the blueprint.
Right.
As a navigating place, you now navigate.
Right, and you've contributed to it. You're participating in it.
Oh, definitely, absolutely.
Right, at this point. And that is the point of a lot of what we're going to be doing in the next few weeks, is talking about participation. Let me go on to
Mystique.
number 8. Okay, so in number 8, the Bakens have it as interconnectedness. We are creatures of many kingdoms, interconnectedness. There's a frog inside, and here I added this idea, which is what, how it came to me through pop culture, which is in Paul Simon's song, Senorita with a Necklace of Tears, I think. He said, there's a frog in South America whose venom is the cure for all the ills of mankind, or all the ills mankind can endure, or something like that. So we're all connected, and we have to understand that. And we have to understand that fairies and elves are also real and connected. And, many logos-oriented men would poo-poo that, but, if you can think of it, it's real. And it has an implication on your life. And so, anyway, my takes on it, this is realization of the collective unconscious, understanding our political fate. For example, understanding that January 6th was a political or a collective unconscious event. It was a psychic epidemic. And you have connections at the family, city, county, state, federal, global levels that are all unconscious, and you don't know what they are consciously necessarily. And recognizing our religions and ourselves and other religions and paths. And so that was my cut on it. Comments?
H being a double 4, it's an extremely powerful number of authority. And it is when one is connected to wherever they happen to navigate to, then that's the power of relating. It's just unparalleled, unparalleled awakening. You are connected. You can relate to things without agenda. You have a connection.
Right. And of course, Carl Jung observed that the collective unconscious is actually what human beings mean by God, the word God, and what God is and how it interacts with us. God interacts with us. It's in the collective. And it is the unconscious, whether it's personal unconscious or collective unconscious. So moving on.
It's certainly the nest where God can blossom.
Yeah, surely. And you know, when Edinger talked about, for example, the Lord's Prayer being 7 petitions to the God image, to the internal God. And I concur with that. And so if we pray to God Almighty, then that's a prayer that, you know, our country is formed in such a way that we will survive our cataclysms of late and emerge stronger. And you know, we can each do that because every country in the world has been suffering from COVID, and we can pray that the unconscious of all of us will, in some total, do the necessary to cure the human species of COVID sufficiently so that we can resume what we would perceive as normal life today, let's say. And that's unconscious. And you know, we can't know what the attitudes are of, let's say, the Bangladeshis, or more so the Pakistanis, or the Chinese. But we hope that their unconscious will seek the same result with the COVID, for example.
We
Well,
admire
you know, and Skip, go ahead.
the orientation of the turtle. The turtle comes from the depth of the ocean, and it orients according to the reflection of the moon. When little turtles are born, they go straight to the moon. So here it's showing that from the depth there is the glimpse of the height of the reflection of light.
And
It's looking at it.
Also, 8 is a number of a plateau, speedy movement kind of thing. And this whole thing graphically, I mean, the turtle, there's the life from the depths poking its head up, and it starts to have color on its head. So there's a differentiation of its form and its appearance. And the dragonfly is a symbol of transformation. And then you have the pair of fish below the water and the pair of birds above the water, and then this UFO-ish thing up top. And what's interesting to me, to put a finer grain on the dragonfly as a symbol of transformation, their larvae hatch underwater, and they are actually, for insects, the great white sharks of the pond. They're huge, voracious carnivores. So you go from this turtle that has its house on its back emerging to this dragonfly that came from there and now has wings, from the fish up to then the birds, and there's your collective unconscious all in one little graphic lineage.
So just in case says, what's the flying saucer doing in this card? And my answer is, I have no clue. Then he says, John 14:2, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. And so, you know, there are
chambers of a memory palace. I think Robert Moore, the architect, might say.
Right. Okay, moving on to number 9. This is Transcendence. This is where we get to Transcendence. And so the Bakens say, bliss fills the cracks of time, sweet scent of lotus flowers, Zen master levitating, and consciousness of the multidimensional self. And Skip's take is recognizing our religions and ourselves in other religions and paths. cracks are where the light comes in. It takes more than recognition. It takes action to save ourselves and our world, more than ecumenical lunches. And the Jubilee is not yet. That's a reference to the fundamentalist Christians who think that all the bad people are going to die and they're going to be beamed up to heaven. 2,000 of them will be beamed up to heaven. We aren't there yet. And my comment on the levitation is it's a nice reverie, but we have a lot of work to do first. And realization, whether you have left a piece to the puzzle or not. Okay, so this is Jung's point that if you want to make a difference in the world, you have to do it in this life. You can't put it off till when you're in heaven.
And to speak directly to that, then the levitation is to rise above your circumstances.
Right. Okay, that's fair enough. And other comments? Go to anybody?
I just add dynamism as a word for the 9. It's the most dynamic of all of the numbers. It turns back in on itself, Any number added to 9 equals 9. I mean, 9 and 8 ends up becoming like 9 and 8 is 17, which is then 8. So any number added to 9 becomes itself again.
So it's self-realizing.
Yeah, self-realization, realizing or self-actualization. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And realizing that you have made a contribution as opposed to just being a periodic use of carbon atoms.
Well, yeah, exactly. And even in, I think, their composition of the Lotus or Lodi, you have 1 over 1, the background Lotus to the bottom Lotus. There's the above and below immediately across the threshold of that water. And then you have the pair either side. And then you put the nature 5 Lotus up top. So in a sense, numerically, they're also tracking the path of how the groupings and the ungroupings and the identity and the differentiation actually come into being.
Well, it also shows the, if you notice, the lotuses form a circle above over the head, like a type of crown, which also in the center is showing a real castles made out of crystal.
That crystalline lattice that, yes,
Exactly.
Skip brought up earlier.
So it is a transcendent home that it's created, yet the human, the being itself is in the middle of it all.
Yes, and also maybe Superman lives there.
And it doesn't need to create to it doesn't have its same form. Apparently it doesn't need the form to realize that crystal world.
That's a good point.
Skip, I know you're offline right now, but you can probably hear this. I think that's an interesting, rather self-conscious take at the end, where you say realization whether you have left a piece to the puzzle or not. You have, Skip. And I think that if you are experiencing the sweet scent of lotus flowers, then you are filling that space that the world needs, that you are filling that space that you were born for. I believe that there's a place for all of us, and you are filling that space if you are at that place. And Skip, you are definitely filling what it means to be Skip Conover in history. So I don't think.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I don't think a Zen master has to even realize whether or not they've left a puzzle. I think they have to be grateful. They are probably grateful that they have left a piece. I'm not saying you're a Zen master, but I am saying that you are a kind of master. And
A life well lived.
Yeah, you have left a kind of good piece in the puzzle.
Well, I believe that when one reaches a pinnacle, any kind of pinnacle, you either tip off, and in this case, it is self-realization, move on to another complete dimension, or you have to turn around and come back down the hill to teach others how to do that. So it's very tricky. 9 is that place where that becomes a fact of transcendence, and where the next place of being will come along, what that means and what it looks like.
Yes. And I think if with the idea there of cracks or where the light comes in, that's the external illumination that inspires us. And at the same time, if I come from an inner perspective, the Japanese art of kintsukuroi or kintsukuroi, which is the art of repairing a broken vase with platinum, silver, gold lacquer, where then the metaphor of the self or the vessel is that the inner gold flows up from within to fill those cracks. So in a sense, the inner gold and splendor comes up to meet the light that comes in at the cracks. Like an epoxy, in a way, they mix and they create connections rather than scars.
Good one. Okay, moving on to number 10. So here the Bakens have given us the golden flower of life. Enlightenment represents humanities, apostrophe S, this should be, I guess, humanities. Okay, opportunity. Now we are invited to enter a golden age of peace and enlightenment shared with divine consciousness, deep spiritual insight, sacred geometry and symbols, and the Kabbalah. Now, I'm way not with them on this card in terms of what they say about it. So, first of all, I want to say that the Enlightenment, as we refer to it in the West, was really an endarkenment. Not everything can be solved for X. Okay, so science hasn't addressed the spiritual dimension at all, and they've simply taken the spiritual dimension off the table because they can't measure it in a scientific, materialistic way, and they've missed a whole huge half of life. And so then I said, we are our saviors. No one is coming back. God is within, and we have to save ourselves. And recognizing our shadow, individuation, and equals incarnation. So in other words, bringing ourselves together. This is fundamental Jungian psychology. We must sacrifice for our wholeness. We don't get there without sacrifice, and we are all sons and daughters of God. This is my view, Skip's opinion, and so comments.
I think you said it, with all sons and daughters of God. I mean, the God and the flower of life, sacred geometry mandala at the top with a Lotus, and then the double quaternity either side, and
Right.
then you get
And
back
they
to the pair at the bottom with
Right.
the original and the mandala in the middle.
Yeah, my point is, okay, you can talk about Kabbalah or sacred geometry or whatever you want. And the reality is that you just have to get in yourself and do the work. There's no easy answer out there. And
Says the P versus the J. So
Yeah.
because I am INFJ and I just shake my head. I love your perspective though.
I also love the implication that even if we don't encounter anybody else, even if we don't, I mean, I'm thinking of all the people I know personally who are anchorites or hermits, and I know a bunch of them through in the church, and who sometimes are frustrated because they don't think people see what the point of what they're doing is. They are sacrificing for wholeness. There is something to be said for doing inner work so that you become all that you can be. And it's not just in your encounters with others. There is something luminous that affects the world around you if you are being everything you can be.
Yes, I mean you really just hit the nail on the encounter with yourself. That's beautiful.
right.
We,
Go ahead, Phil.
we think those are really beautiful outtakes from Skip. There's just one that we quite don't. No one is coming back. That one kind of sends me on different paths, because there's something about energy that moves on and transcends and magnetizes the way it might have an impact in magnetizing his way back into a soul. And I would share that to some degree my being has identifies being an old soul, and there are many references that verify this in many ways, including the fact that if in this lifetime I don't really root and incarnate well, it's because it's so new and different that and a really old soul might have a problem. So what do you mean when no one is coming back?
Well, I mean that neither Christ or any other enlightened being is coming back to save any of us. That the energy that you're talking about might save us, but it's not going to be a physical person. And I think that,
Okay.
and I think that a lot of, unless we embody that ourselves, okay. In other words, I'm not saying that there won't be another person as enlightened as the Buddha or as powerfully connected to God as Jesus Christ was. That may be, but that person is not going to come out of the heavens and drop down among us and say, follow me. We're going to have the Jubilee, and 2,000 of you get to come, and the rest of you, well, the devil take the hindmost. That ain't happening.
Okay. Yes.
Well, and I
maybe
would believe, I would
clarify
second that, because I mean, the second coming is not going to be some dude getting tacked to a cross that leads us from outside. The second coming is going to be the capital S self.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean, it's going to be
each
us
and every
as
one of
we
us are the
change
Holy
ourselves.
Grail. I mean,
Right.
don't look outside yourself for the Grail. I mean, even going to the darkest place, I think Arthur said to Parzival, but going to the darkest place is the mud that Lotus grows from. And that's the deep place within us. So I would say the second coming is each and every one of us on this call and in the world. And to the extent that we each do it is our own responsibility for how far we get and what we can enrich the world with from what we get to share with.
No one can do it for you.
I do wonder, though, about living side by side with those who do believe the Jubilee is coming, or who believe the second coming is any minute now.
Well, I would move away.
Well, that's what I did. That's what I was just going to say. I was living in an Orthodox Jewish community, and until coronavirus, I didn't realize the literal dangers, because they're watching out for their own, and they're also expecting this second coming, which I overheard people talking about sometimes. There was a rabbi speaking with one of his congregants in the street, not wearing masks, just about 3 months ago. And he was going to be moving within days. And his congregant was saying, well, maybe this second coming is going to come even before you move. Like it could be that, because for them, it's that instantaneous. And it is like the ship comes in, or as Brendan said, knight in shining armor, or, you know, the cowboy with the white hat, whatever you want to call it. You know, it is that miraculous. And I think that's part of what was going on, again, to bring up January 6th in Washington. This sort of idea that there is some like parallel reality or parallel. So we're living, here we are studying, pursuing our paths, you know, saying whatever prayers we say, doing whatever rituals we do. I don't know. I just wonder in this group, how does that work, right? I mean, I know we just have to put one foot in front of the other.
Well, it doesn't work in the physical world at all. Okay, is the
Right.
answer.
Well, and also the ascensionists too. I mean, my joke is, wow, cool. You're sitting around on the couch smoking a lot of hope. It's like, you know, it's like you're looking for a quick fix that, oh, did anyone tell you the quick fixes have shallow roots? It's like someone in a movie would say, I'd die for you. I'm like, that's a cop out, because then now you don't have to do anything. Why don't you live for me? Because that's going to take a lot of work.
Right.
Yeah.
Though I don't want to be the devil's advocate here, but
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
The Jewish people do have a very profound understanding of the nature of God. Now they express it in the way they do, because that is how they have moved in the world for 2,000 years. So maybe when they say that the second Messiah is coming and so on, means that the collective humanity is going to be in a position to actually receive or become and act upon this magic, this enlightenment.
Right.
So they're not really speaking about, you know, all this person, although in the real earth, we know that humans identify, you know, the president is supposed to save us. You know, we jump on the boogie wagon of one person that they are responsible for this or that, when in reality is everyone. So that's just, but the deeper level is that they might be saying that as a collective, humanity will be available to make that shift.
Yeah, I was speaking about a specific community where I lived, and the numbers of deaths represent how much they believed that God was going to take care of whoever he was going to take care of, which was a god with his white beard, people were going to die according to God's plan. People were going to be born according to God's plan. So when there were funerals, thousands of people showed up. When there were weddings, there was a 7,000 person wedding. And they burned masks. And I think I've talked about this recently, and I didn't I didn't understand until, you know, somewhere around that December 21st moment, opening, that December 23rd, I was signing a new lease and I moved to New Jersey from Brooklyn. Because I realized my own personal life was in danger and there wasn't a way for me to reconcile that safety. So this is what I'm not talking about Jews in general. I'm talking about the fact that there are these, let's call them pockets of people. And one of my neighbors did specifically to my face say, this was last summer, the president does not wear a mask, why should I? She said that. I mean, so that I'm talking about the living beside these people. We are living and they are living. I can hide in my apartment all I want, and that's what I did in Brooklyn, but it's a lot to sort of digest. While we're digesting this, it's a lot to embrace.
Well, it's a question of incarnation, of bringing it into yourself. And when you bring it into yourself and you grok it, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, and people often look for rationalizations to substantiate what they already aren't going to do anyway, but now they have a reason, and those reasons are usually relatively unreasonable. I mean, I have to say, you can't quarantine stupid. I mean, it's the way I look at it. I mean, oh my God, yeah, so that guy went and jumped in the lake. Did you realize they filled the lake with acid last year? Not a good idea to jump, you know. So it's the peer pressure piece of the herding mentality can get in. I hear you there, Annabelle, about that you were in danger of get the heck out of Dodge.
Yes, some like cults, some extremely fundamentalist groups can turn into cults.
Yeah,
and there's very little culture in cults. I mean, unless you're talking about petri dish culture, and that's a different story.
Right.
Well, okay, so I'm going to go on to the court cards now.
Wonderful.
And let me say a couple of things before I show you what I've done here. Number one is the Bakens did change all the suits. And so, in other words, there is no sword suit in the Baken deck. There is no Pentacles suit in the Baken deck. And so they also changed the identity of the court. And my personal take on it, and you know, you're welcome to have another opinion and go get yourself a set of the Fifth Tarot, which some of us have already, including me. And I don't want to be too critical, because as I say, I love a lot of the imagery that they have in here, and a lot of the things they say make sense and has grown on me over time. But I could not countenance the change in the court because I want to understand the court in the context of everything I've been doing spiritually. So if you want to know what the Bakens did with the court, please go get yourself a copy of their tarot deck. And so what I've done is I haven't put their pictures in, and I haven't put their categorization in. And I just want to talk about the four court cards. And so from my point of view, we have the prince, princess, and the prince. And at this level, in my view, the princess's belief comes from spirit by experience, whereas the prince's belief comes from spirit by study. And so my point about that is when we're younger, we have to believe. We have to believe in order to go through the education that allows us to make the jump to the next phase, which is knowing. And so so when you say you believe, quote unquote, I say, fine, you believe. And, that's the way all of us were brought up, to believe, because our parents told us this is what it is, and our pastors told us, and everybody else, our rabbis told us this and that and the other thing. And so you have to believe when you're young. But when you're past middle age, you need more than that. You need more than belief in order to survive spiritually. And so then I go to the king and queen, and I say that the queen knows spirit by sharing an experience. In other words, by interacting with others, by relationship, and so on, and by their own experience. The queens know, they have a numinous experience, and they know that's what it's about. And so they get it by experience. The king gets to knowing by knowing the spirit, knows the spirit by study and experience. Okay, so that would be from a Jungian point of view, at least in my opinion, but other comments. It can be a debate. I don't mind.
No, if anyone not going to step in, I took their course. Actually, interestingly, I found it to be critically and almost instantly clear that they took a path of initiation and individuation. Their page is the seeker. Their knight or page or princess is the seeker. Their knight is the initiate. Their queen is the apprentice, which I found interesting. And then the king is the elementor. But if I look at the page as the princess, moving to become the knight, which is the initiate, the king and queen, the queen and the king is not the consort of the queen. The knight is the consort of the queen in most histories of tarot. And the initiate enters the apprentice, enters the queen. And so what happens is the masculine initiate becomes the feminine receiver. The apprentice receives the master's teachings. So to me, then the initiate and the apprentice become one. That's the right and the left, the masculine and the feminine, which then moves into the elementor of Lotus, standalone, and there's the individuation process for, I think, complete from what would visually and from a title label perspective be theirs. And interestingly, I think their imagery, I didn't translate the Mayan glyphs in the stele of the hair, but it's a very Hathor image, a very higher octave being image in their elementor. So I kind of feel like I follow you along, but instead of to me being four separate individuals, I find the princess or seeker to be that entering the higher self, and the initiate and princess, or initiate and apprentice, or as it were, knight and queen, that's one whole individual. That's the evolved seeker or evolved knight or page or princess. And then those then further evolve to the king, which here is the elementor. So I think that
Right.
Big picture, I think the difference between our perspectives is only that you kept them individual people moving forward. That's how they learn. I keep them as one person that enters the court as a page, differentiates into male and female knight and queen, and then reintegrates at a higher octave in the king, which really to me doesn't go against the grain of what you're talking about. I think we're just running a different non-parallel line.
Okay, three of these cards don't even have a human being on them, I think, or maybe it's only two. But,
No, actually,
but
only
anyway,
one.
anyway,
You have feet.
I'll share the elementor, which is like the king. It's a beautiful picture.
It's a very Hathor image, and there's Mayan stele, and I haven't looked at them to see if they're grammatically correct visually, but the braids in the hair have
here
glyphs.
is the elementor. And you know, my I don't know, part of my issue is I think that tarot readers ought to be able to read a tarot deck without having to relearn a whole language. So I regard the changes in suit names and the changes of the court cards as sort of cutesy things to differentiate their deck. But you know, if you're going to buy this deck to be a reader, you're going to have to learn a whole different way of thinking about the tarot, and that might be a surprise.
Well, respectfully, I'd have to disagree. I think they just hit the thesaurus too hard, because to me the concepts are same. They were in a different suit, and frankly, when they get into a different suit, you're in a different land and requires different considerations. I think they went to a new suit, and so to me, artistically, gave them plenty of license to call them whatever they wanted to.
Well, yeah, certainly that's true in the fifth suit.
Right.
I'm also
and the other
talking
suits,
about
though,
the
not.
others. Yeah. So
that was a little.
So someone who's
glossy.
a reader, you know, I didn't make the connection up personally with what the feathers were, for example, and which of the suits was the feathers. And so as a reader, I would have to entirely relearn.
Well, I think that's
deck.
the piece. You're running a rote, and for example, I'm running a what does the image do for me from a mythological and symbological knowledge. I get it. I mean, you're running from these cards have specific meanings that orbit around those meanings. I get that, and I can do that. But to me, every card's kind of an oracle card in a way, in any deck, tarot or otherwise.
Okay, that's fair enough. And you're an extremely experienced tarot reader, and so that's fair enough. I think for the average person who wants to buy a deck,
yes,
and possibly a different deck, I wouldn't start with the fifth tarot. And the reason that I've done this evening and done this emphasis on this fifth suit is because I do believe that there should be a fifth suit. And I do believe that a lot more thinking has to go into that fifth suit. And
I would say, Skip, that as a lifelong tarot reader, I would also advise people think twice before following me down my path. Because we both know, we all know, I'm kind of an anomaly at that. I mean, it has nothing to do with experience even. There's just it's how I'm wired to read visually. And so that to me too, I actually appreciate you putting the qualifier with other people, because I think this deck it's beautiful, but I think it would throw people who are, if you have not inspected your expectations
right. And Jordan, you are a past master at all this esoteric imagery that goes through oracle decks and so on. And so the average person doesn't have the time to get to that level of understanding so that they can do anything with it. And
yeah, I'm more like Imhotep than a tarot reader. Brendan's got to stand up. You're right.
All right, go ahead, Brendan.
Skip, I know you have with this group and with the in-depth reading group and other things, gotten yourself into a very busy schedule. And I know with our group, the in-depth group, the Wednesday group, you've managed to conscript 2 or 3 other people to help you run that group. Have you thought that maybe you're the guy to do the fifth suit in a cohort with people like Jordan, maybe other people that you've come across?
Well, I have thought about it, and I have connections in India where I could get the imagery done fairly inexpensively by very capable artists. And so what today was my first cut on what a fifth suit would look like, and pay attention to if it was going to be Jungian oriented as opposed to Christian oriented, or witchcraft oriented or whatever, because there's so many tarot decks out there that refer to all these different traditions. And so from my perspective as a leader of a Carl Jung depth psychology reading group, from that perspective, I would like to focus on consciousness and how we come to consciousness and how we develop our consciousness. And so if I were doing it, that's what I would want to try to do, and to think about what the imagery should be for that purpose. So when I gave my take, I understand it's different from the Bakens take. I don't criticize their take in terms of, as I said, their numeral cards kind of grew on me as I worked on it and studied it. But I'm also interested in trying to educate people about psychology. And to that end, if I were doing a tarot deck, I would do a deck that would help educate people about psychology and the pitfalls of life that happen in the modern West. Whether that's reasonable or not, I don't know, but that's what I would do.
I think it is. And in fact, going through this has been a pretty nice exercise, because one of my things is sight reading decks, just straight out of the bat, do a reading with a deck I've never seen. Now, granted, again, I'm a little bit of an anomaly, but this week doing that with this deck, 5 words came up: your quintessence of the human being. And what the architect in me said was, well, we need to tear down that house. What is the tarot supposed to look like now? And now that's a little extreme in one sense, but there is if I'm going to go in and put in some bricks, I'm not just going to put heavy stuff on top of a flat plate. I mean, so when you said quintessence of the human being, you posed a sanctuary of a question of, okay, is it just a fifth suit, or is there a whole nother mode of being that the tarot deck can take? So I don't have an answer to that yet, but it's gotten me thinking about just tarot in regards to the quintessence of the human being, and what does that mean? What does it look like, and how can it be enacted? Because those 5 words, they skip. They kind of are like a slow metronome.
For the other 4 suits, I'm sure that the settling of what the card should be took centuries. Okay, right. And it wasn't something that just boom happened. And right. I'm not sure where we're going to get there. But I challenge everybody that is seeing this video to please start thinking about it, because it's essential.
Yeah, it really is.
We have to understand that the human being is a unique thing. I mean, there was a drawing that somebody did. I can do it very quickly, which is, I think it was Nick that showed me this, but this is looking at the 5 suits, and so I'll get rid of my cloaking here for a minute. Okay, so this is the picture that he drew, and so each of the dots on the outside of the square are the 4 suits as they currently exist, and the dot in the middle is actually the top of a pyramid, and it's that top of that pyramid is the human, or the pyramid itself is the human being. In other words, we need the development of all 4 of those suits up all of our sides in our psychological life, and ultimately we get to a pinnacle.
I remember that conversation where then architecturally, from a capital S self perspective, a pyramid is itself its own foundation. All of the structural forces are resolved within. So that was a great visual metaphor that he put forth there.
Right. And there was another one that I think I can share with you if I can find it, because Khushbu in India had herself tattooed with it. And if I can get to her tattoo, because I did a screenshot last night of her tattoo when I was talking to her. And by the way, for those of you who are friends of Khushbu, her birthday is going to be the 2nd of April, and she wants to have a global watch party together to watch a movie from Amazon Prime called Ajanta. And and that will be April 2nd. I will probably support that. Okay, so here's an image that I took off my phone last night of Khushbu, but she's got this. Here's the quintessence, the circle in the middle, and there's a square around it, and then a triangle, and then another circle. And so when I was talking to her about the quintessence, that's the way she saw it, with the self in the center, of course. And there is a square in there. It's hard to see in this particular image, but that's another way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And
then you get to 1, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Here, is that the same image?
No, because she has this. Well, maybe. It's not exactly the same. It's almost the same. You have a.
That's Kriya Yoga from.
Well, didn't
Southern
all
India.
of her shapes
And that
all
is
of her
Babaji's the Kriya Yoga tradition of that is their symbol.
Yeah, well, it's a symbol very similar to that, but Khushbu is a Gujarati, so she's from northern India.
Didn't all of her shapes there touch tangentially at a midpoint? Like there were no spaces between the shapes. They all, I think, touched correctly.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a point of tangential touch at a midpoint, which actually usually the center is not in the middle, but in those the center keeps moving around the middles to be together. Can you enlarge that a little bit, please?
I'll try.
Let's see here.
Or I'll just pinch it out here. I mean,
circle, square, triangle.
Wait a minute, I can do it here.
Triangle.
Yeah,
so
everything's.
She's got a circle in the middle, a square here,
Mm-hmm.
a triangle around it. Okay, and then a circle around the triangle. Okay,
so I see how
is...
she resolved the square. The two of the points are on one of the legs, the other 2 points midpoint the other, and then the circle inside that. Okay, I see.
Right, and so this, this touches on the alchemists and on medieval Western activity on these things, and obviously Michelangelo drew that in the Vitruvian Man and so on.
Right.
So
well, to me, that's what's interesting about sacred geometry is often it's not just math, numbers, and shapes. Is as a visual thinker, sometimes without words, they tell the exact same story with just shapes.
Mm-hmm. I told the same story with dance.
Well, exactly. And then what I think is interesting is, there's sometimes some, like my comment on the Om symbol on one of the cards in the fifth tarot, I'm like, did they amputate it? To me, I don't want to go so far as to say, oh, look at the bad visual grammar, because maybe there's artistic license, but then it would be lost. It's too fine a grain. But that's a great tattoo she has there. So did you know what inspired her?
I don't know.
No.
Khushbu is a force of nature, and so I can't say
So to
exactly,
speak. So to
so
speak.
to say, and she's beloved by many of us, and she blessed me with 2 hours of her time last night, which I was prepared to stay up until 2 a.m.
Nice.
to achieve. So, this is a young woman who is sort of the end of the line, if you call the suicide hotline in Bangalore, India. And so
It's a death worker. Okay. Outside of.
So I asked her one time, what do you say, or how can you approach someone who's considering suicide and help them avoid it? And she said, I give them all of me.
Yeah, that's whole body listener. That's.
And although, I mean, she and I have read the Bhagavad Gita together, so obviously we've had a spiritual experience together. And that was surely a spiritual experience, but, every time I have had any interaction with her, I have been spiritually benefited, surely. And that's without any proselytizing or anything like that. So this is a very unique and special woman who we all need to nurture.
She sounds like quite a gift.
Yeah. So I am, go ahead.
Well, that sounds lovely. I'll share that at the beginning, when I heard, oh, there's the fifth suit, I was perplexed. And I said, oh, because I came to that by making real the story of a neophyte going through all the stages of the tarot. At the end, it turns out then the fifth suit is naturally what arose, which is the third scene. First scene is somewhere in a dimension. Second scene is Earth. And after Earth came the third, which is the transcendent function, the transcendent world, somewhere else. And all of the characters became pretty much the same, like I mentioned, and they had put a number on top, just so you know that they all came and transformed them, and they were transformed into a new world. So I arrived at that fifth suit by virtue of completing the journey.
Interesting.
So it is in. So when I heard, oh, they're going to make graphic the fifth dimension, then I had to go and dig up why would that be when it is completely implied, as if one is a neophyte or an individuation person, once they go through it, they have no other choice but to depart from that last kingdom or die, right? So when you depart from that last kingdom, where do you go? And that's the transcendent space where all the characters are
ultimately go, yeah.
The same, and they all look the same. I make them all look the same, except for the 5 of the universe card, where the neophyte suddenly has wings. Out of his fool's bag, he has the fool. He's against the fool, but when he opens his bag, his little pouch, he's got wings that he can put on, and then he meets the completion through something I designed the way he met. He lost it before, and he meets it again at that fifth element. So it kind of arose because of going through the journey.
Right. So as we've been talking about Kushbu, I have shared with you a link. This is a mantra that she shared with us several times last spring and summer when she was regularly joining us in the wisdom path. She was closing all of our sessions with this mantra. And she's asked me to take down her personal story because, and so I've respected that. But I think I was allowed to keep the mantra, which was at the end of other sessions. And so it's a 2-minute long video if you want to see why I'm so moved, because I was very moved. I'm very moved anytime she says this mantra, which she actually sings it, which is Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, which is a Sanskrit mantra.
Yeah, it's been very powerful. Mantras are powerful, no doubt about it.
Pardon?
Yes, mantras are very powerful.
Yeah, well, this one especially. So,
so Skip, I think your whole quintessence of the human being. And at one point, I just wanted to kind of drop this in as food for thought. The architect in me just resurrected and went, I've been taking issue with, why do we have to draw the fifth suit? We know it's there. Consciousness, sure. Quintessence of the human being, yes. But the architect in me started to I started banging my head against the wall look, I drew the building. I'm not going to draw the space afterwards. So there's that space within, and how do I draw consciousness? So there came that kind of how to express the ineffable in a way. And I think that's one of the fun parts of the fifth suit, as to not even existentially, not even non-dually, not even interdependently. There's what's there to draw? Some blank pages? And I kind of go back to the Yoga Sutras of
Patanjali.
Yeah, Patanjali. Yeah, Patanjali. And that feels to be a fifth suit. And it dispenses with the structure of everything else, and it's its own thing. So I kind of feel, I'm kind of feeling like that is close to what I've seen conceptually as an enacted or visceral fifth suit.
Yeah, well, what I would say is there's nothing in the Bible or the Torah or the Quran that adequately symbolizes the messages there. Okay,
right.
And so in the Tarot, we can only provide the logos, even if we provide images.
Right.
And the Eros part, the part that is only now becoming understood, is the part that we need to understand. Now, I don't know, some of you know of my discussions about Jordan Peterson and the fact that he is the poster boy for the logos, because he says he's the savior. He thinks of himself, or he was thinking of himself a couple of years back, as the savior of the logos, quote unquote. Okay, and he could never get past this issue, where people wanted him to say that he believed in God. Do you believe in God? And he could never get by that. And he's come out of 18 months of intense illness, very deep, and he had a conversation with Jonathan Pajot last Monday, a week ago today, and he's had over like 700,000 hits on it or something up to now. It's actually 753,000 hits since last Monday. Okay, but I wrote to him a letter that I put in the comments to that conversation, where he again was expressing his angst at getting over this belief in God issue. And it appears that he's pinned my response to the top of his comments, and he's had 5,623 comments, and every time I look at it, it looks like mine is the top one. Now, I don't know if that's because Jordan pinned it, or it's because if I'm looking at it, it's going to tell me that I'm the top one.
I don't think so. I think you would have to pin it, because I've done that and I've gone back to try to find something. And even when I click the link, it's buried in such a way that I'm having to scroll and scroll to go back to reply to a replied comment.
Right. So I've given you the link to the conversation that he had with Jonathan Pajot. And immediately under it, you can find my comment. But I wanted to share one more thing. And that is a new book that is published by Chiron called A Mystical Path Less Traveled, a Jungian Psychological Perspective by Jerry Wright. And I've written to Jerry and invited him to speak to our wisdom path at the suggestion of Chiron. So it has Chiron's blessing. So as a result of that, I think it might be likely that Jerry will appear.
Is it a mythical path or mystical path?
Mystical path. What did you say, Annabelle?
Could you repeat the title of the book? Yeah.
Okay, the title of the book is A Mystical Path Less Traveled.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and it's in his introduction, he also answered Jordan Peterson's angst and quandary. And so I thought I would read this to you. I also put an excerpt of it in my letter to Jordan Peterson, which seems to have been pinned, as I say. But here's what Wright is saying. It's only 2 pages that I'm going to read to you. But first of all, he's quoting from his 2018 book. This book just came out last week. And it's published by Chiron, so you might have to purchase it from there. I'm sure they would appreciate it if you purchased it directly, Chiron Publications. But anyway, he's quoting his previous book, and he says, looking back from a place far down the evolutionary road, we may see the religions of the past as necessary stages along a twisting, labyrinthine path toward the realization that we are, in fact, what we imagined our former deities and devils to be. We are, in fact, what we imagined our former deities and devils to be. Our species will come to recognize and to own both our glory and our glory that were projected, necessarily so, onto the external deities and devils. In the wisdom of psyche, we will conclude that it was necessary to see our creative and destructive capacities in projected form, until we could own and manifest our own responsibility. Squinting, that is as far as I can see. And then he starts to comment on this. He says, when I have verbalized this conclusion to audiences who have invited me to speak, I am met with a combination of bewilderment, disbelief, and sheer terror on the one hand, and on the other hand, if the audience is familiar with analytical psychology, a knowing nod that someone has said what they have always suspected. And then he puts in italics, We have created all our deities and devils from numinous experiences that come upon us uninvited and unbidden. And then the end of the italics, and then he says, since falling off the back porch of the church, now mind you, he did an entire career as a Presbyterian minister, and he is a doctor of ministry, although he's also an analyst. So he says, since falling off the back porch of the church, I am often asked, well, do you still believe in God? I love the question. It's like throwing me into the proverbial briar patch with Brer Rabbit. It is one of the most important questions at this crisis stage of the soul of our species. Rather than asking the inquirer what he or she means by the word God, and therefore dodging the question, I often ask a clarifying question. Do you mean the God of the Judeo-Christian tradition, the God of the Old and New Testaments, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And this is how Jordan Peterson has often dodged the question, okay, too. He would say, what do you mean by God, right? But here's Wright's answer. After receiving an affirmative answer, I reply, no, of course not. I then amplify. That God image of my ancestors is no longer meaningful for me, though in my childhood and early adulthood, it was the center of my religious and church life. But its shelf life has expired. It had a best by age 30 expiration date. After that, it was no longer nourishing. It was tasteless and likely toxic for me personally. With the Sufi mystics, it is sufficient for me to say, there is no God except the experience of God. Or I echo Carl Jung near the end of his life, when asked if he believed in God, his mystical reply was, I know, I don't need to believe, I know. At this stage in my life, when I speak of God, I mean the animating powers and felt presences at the heart of matter itself and at the heart of all that does matter. God is no longer an external, supernatural, metaphysical, interventionist being. That was a good story once upon a time, but these times demand more, beginning with taking more responsibility for our own godlike capacities for great good and great evil. God is being itself, life itself, in all its mystical mixture, and we are its human conduit. With such a perspective, life is a mystical path. Every step, every day, every moment, everywhere, and every when. Note to the reader, the following paragraph is a good example of unconscious revering. Quote, personally, the process of writing and speaking about unanswerable yet unavoidable questions and mysteries continues to serve the following purpose: to further free my mind, heart, and soul from the religious constraints that were a part of my religious indoctrination, constraints that remain in place for the majority of Western culture and likely beyond. Although I am no authority on anyone beyond the borders of my own skin, and even within those fleshy borders, I remain a mystery to myself, all the while proposing that I am able to see others most clearly, especially those who disturb and discuss me, their numbers multiplying daily in the weeks approaching and following a national election, an election whose outcome was foreordained to breed more chaos and contempt, a diet on which we continue to feed daily. Then he says, I have decided to leave the unedited and preceding long run-on sentence. It is in memory and honor of a most honest critic of my previous book. still intellectually sharp at age 95, he found the book topic very interesting. When his daughter, who had suggested he read the book, asked what he thought about it, he replied, "He writes long sentences."
That's the most hilarious. I swear, when I heard that the first time, I had tears in my eyes. I was laughing so hard.
Right. So I'm sorry, Annabelle, you look a little shocked to me.
No.
No? Okay. I mean, I would.
We agree with him.
You write long sentences. I mean, what?
Serious.
It kind of just takes you out at the knees. It's like, oh, okay.
Right. And so
That brings up language again,
surely.
It sure does.
Right.
the fifth element.
Right. And so I want to remind everyone that I did do a lecture called Finding the Living God a year and a half ago. And I listened to the entire thing again this morning because I know I'm going to be interacting with Jerry Wright, and I wanted to show him that it was in my wheelhouse what his book is about, and to talk about things that matter to both of us. And so, I invite you and everyone that's watching the YouTube channel to watch that, because I think I did a good job at that time.
So sometimes we try to find your links and they don't readily pop up.
Okay, well, wait a minute. I will give you the link for that one, because that's...
And Gilda, what I've found, I will type skip.conover as much of the title as I can, and then lose the articles and just put in the meat words, nouns and verbs, and it'll usually come up in the top 3 or 4.
That's complicated.
Well,
that means I have to know.
I throw the rocks and not the pebbles, and sometimes it pops up.
Okay.
Here's the actual link, and I will provide it to you.
I mean, I understood. Thank you for sharing. I just probably need to know what the actual title is in order to throw out the, articles. and things.
Okay, so it's Finding the Living God. And here's the link. L is capitalized, however. Okay, so there you have it. And,
thank you.
And I will put it on the YouTube chat as well.
Yeah, that works best for me.
Yeah, and so the point is that I'm not at the prince and princess stage as I discussed it. I feel that I too know, and I know how I got there.
Right.
And so I did an 1.5-hour long talk on that subject. And if you can stand a few minutes, there are a few interesting things. It's very impossible. It's next to impossible to capture a numinous moment. There are a few that you can capture. Lisa sent me one the other day, which I thought was quite incredible, which showed an aura of hers that was quite amazing. But I have caught 3 major ones on film, or on digit zeros and ones. One of them is 2 still pictures, and the other 2 are video. And
what are they?
They're numinous experiences that happened to me.
And you caught it in the atmosphere.
I caught the experience itself. Okay. And
I love the one where the sun is not on that side of the building, and you're still just brightly shone down on. That's my favorite, because I mean, as an architect too, sun angles are sun angles, and that the sun at that time of day would not be on that side of the building is pretty intense.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, but the one that I like the most is the one of me reading Answer to Job, paragraphs 746 and 747. The reason for that is I was reading something empirically demonstrable comes to our aid. And so those are that's the first phrase of what's in this video. And 2 minutes later, or I guess it's 2 minutes and 19 seconds later, the something empirically demonstrable actually occurs. And
Synchronicity.
yes, absolutely. And
You
all in it
capture
will be
it,
called.
and you caught it up with your iPhone or something.
yeah, and let me just, I'll just show you a short form of that. I think I could find that one. Maybe not. Okay. Sorry, I can't find that one as easily, but it's actually spliced into this other video, the Finding the Living God. But if you can find the original video also, then you have all the links in that video. But it's about 7 minutes long, and what you see is I'm reading along, and I would begin the reading with something empirically demonstrable comes to our aid.
I love how words like that just indelibly go bam. It's like just stamped in your brain.
And then, yeah, and
That's
then
a great line.
And then 2 minutes later, something empirically demonstrable does occur.
Come to your aid. It's
right.
Like...
And then I bravely continue on reading, and you must listen to immediately after the event. You have to listen to the very next two sentences that I'm reading in Answer to Job, which is the first two sentences of paragraph 747. And I keep going bravely, and I get about 2 minutes further into it, and you can see the event unconsciously working on me. And at 4 minutes and 55 seconds, just the enormity of what had just happened to me just overwhelmed me. It's something that would absolutely not be possible to plan by any human being. Nobody could have planned it, but it happened at perfectly the right moment. So anyway, whatever.
Good job on your presentation. That I really love the contrast between theirs and yours to do a nice survey of the example of the fifth suit through their deck in a cursory way that dove in and pulled out some nuggets, but then contrast it with the Jungian perspective and made for some, I feel, some really good comments throughout. I like it more than just going in and doing the quote unquote book review with, some empirically demonstrable things that come to your aid. I mean, I think it was more enriched because you didn't just take it standalone. I think you put it in context of psychology, Jungian, in a Jungian perspective. And I think it really gave it some place to, I think, really get a good,
it's clear that
scenic overlook of it.
Yeah, it's clear that a lot more thinking has to be done about it. And I'm not smart enough to do that thinking. I think that psychologists better than me need to do it. But I do believe that a fifth suit is appropriate. And anytime somebody publishes a fifth suit from now on, I will purchase that deck. Mm-hmm. That's my commitment.
Yeah, you laid a good roadmap out tonight. I mean, I feel like I've got a map where I can go on my own foray but you gave me the cairns, the stacked stone trailheads to, hey, stop here, take a look, scenic overlook here. I mean, I'll have my own experience, but I think one of the gooder, learn me how to talk more, gooder. One of the better form givers, I think, to inspire further thinking. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I don't know what we're going to do next week. If anybody has any ideas, do let me know. I guess we can do the 2s.
Should we do the 6th suit?
Well, we can do the 6th suit. The 6th suit is as in the 6th stage of consciousness. Murray Stein says it is the Kundalini
Itself, right?
The Kundalini itself, and then the 7th suit, the 7th stage of consciousness. Murray Stein commented that he didn't think Jung thought that any Westerner could achieve that level of consciousness. I personally doubt that, but you know, this is in Murray Stein's book. If you want to read about these stages of consciousness, it's in Murray Stein's book entitled Jung's Map of the Soul, an Introduction by Murray Stein. And Murray Stein is, you know, he had a religious education and was doing a lot of biblical / Jungian work back in the 80s. And then he was in Asheville, North Carolina for a long time at the Jung Center there and founded Chiron Publications, as a matter of fact. And then later he has moved to Zurich, and he's now a supervising analyst at the C.G. Jung Institute. He's a past president of the International Association of Analytical Psychology, and so he's quite an authority. I have interviewed him twice, once with Thomas Arst, who was my personal friend and who was the man that invited me to go to Aranos last year, which we had to cancel, unfortunately. And so I interviewed him and Thomas Arst together first on July 28th, 2019, I believe was the date. And then I interviewed him again last August 9th in the Wisdom Path Colloquium. So he's had over 10,000 hits on that one. So
Have you ever come across Stages model by Terry O'Fallon?
no.
She's a developmental human development.
Mm-hmm.
She has a very amazing model, and she's taught it all over the world. And there's a stage. This is similar to tarot, but with other names. It's called meta-aware. There's concrete. There's stages and states. So it's a meta-aware. There's concrete. Middle one, I forget what it is, and then meta-aware. And in the meta-aware category, I would imagine that is where Jung is saying that no Westerner perhaps may yet be there. But she quotes from Aurobindo. Aurobindo, are you familiar with Aurobindo?
Yeah, I know Aurobindo.
Okay, well, Aurobindo's
I've been to
consort.
his place. In fact.
So have I. Aurobindo's consort she's called the Mother.
Yeah.
And he announced that they had to pay attention to the mother, like, because she was his equal in every way. And she was originally French. So that's a Western person right there for you.
Right. Okay, well, that's right. And I don't know if, are you familiar with Aurobindo, Annabelle?
Yeah.
You are, okay. So I don't know about Lisa and Brendan, but do you know who it is, Jordan or Binda? Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah. It's
Okay.
I kind of always wonder whether Jung's basis of that statement is that America, or Western culture primarily, is for the most part, I don't want to baby out with the bathwater too much of a crack generalization, but I mean, removed from nature and mostly grew up without a very vicious monastic sense of military discipline. I mean, such that doing the work is like breath. And so there's this, oh, when can I be done? Can I go on a break now? And it's like, wow, you're on this mountain. If you say that one more time, you lose all your energy. I suggest we try to get off the mountain. I mean, so.
Jordan, is he somebody I should be aware of? Jordan, is he somebody I should be aware of?
Bindu.
Or a Bindo?
Yes.
Musically, it's the mother. I would say.
Yeah, I mean,
powerful.
Yes and no. He has a ashram in Pondicherry in India, and it still exists. It's quite an impressive place, I must say, and he's died about 40 years ago, I suppose, and the mother died maybe 30 years ago. But they still keep their premises where they were living open and available so that you can go and do a pilgrimage to their place. And Aurobindo wrote it's AUROBINDO.
Mm-hmm.
Savitri?
Say it again.
Savitri, that long poem. He has many writings.
Yeah, so he wrote 100 books or something, and so did the mother. And
that is interesting, Skip. I think I told you I was in Pondicherry myself in 1998, but I was at another ashram.
Oh, gee, I mean,
well, there's Oroville. Oroville is part of the ashram where they built that dome, that golden dome that you go meditate inside.
Right.
It was.
And I was in that while they were building it.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Powerful place.
Yeah. But the ashram, everybody contributes, and so even I saw like an 85-year-old man who had to wash pots as his contribution, but about 6 people had to help him get to the sink so that he could manage to wash one pot.
Karma yoga, they call it karma yoga.
Yeah. to do his share. So the other 6 people were doing their share by making sure he could do his share.
Right.
I mentioned him and her because Terry O'Fallon, and if you ever catch up with the Stages model, if you can look it up, you'll see it's really fabulous way of describing movements and the way the development of human being to all the different stages. She could only find verification, since she's a researcher, in the works of Aurobindo that went as far as into the meta-aware, the stages of 6.5 or whatever.
So what is the book called? Terry O'Fallon's book?
Oh, it's a method. I don't know what books she has, but her method is stages. Stages, you will be able to find it. Stages method of human development. It's very sophisticated. And she had, not so long ago, she had a course, and in that course, she took the participants into moving into the meta-aware tier or tiers. And so you had to zoom in and zoom out, zoom into cosmic space, and then back into your being. And she's very refined in taking people through perception, depth, and longitudes. And she
Um,
has a very refined model.
I'm sure that's very useful to many people.
Mhm.
You know, me, I'm a little bit too pedestrian, I think, because I'm down here trying to read whatever I can read, and I hope I hope I'll be able to read Jerry Wright's book, and it's the other one that came today.
Well, you know, no matter what you do, I mean, it's the thing is, you read enough that when something becomes almost breath as an action, and you read so much, I mean, I stay up late and get up early, and I'm like, I'm going to bed. I bet you Skip's still going. So it's like,
yeah.
Well, if you were interested, you could probably just take one of her courses, and and that's a lot easier to.
Would that I had
meander.
would that I had the
That's-
time, Gilda. I think
Oh.
I have to pick my
Your
battles.
battles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
Okay.
I'm sure I'm going to be starting
Oh,
my radiation therapy here within.
oh dear.
Well, I
We'll send
probably
you-
not until early to mid-April, because I have to wait.
Look, did I share with you one of the things that I practice?
What is that?
This is a
oh,
pendulum.
pendulum. Oh,
Or
look
a
at that.
dowser.
What? It's a dowser?
It's a pendulum.
It's a pendulum. Okay.
Yes. And the pendulum reads your aura, and it corresponds with you like your numinous space. And the more you pay attention to it, the more it pays attention to you. And it's really incredible. We use it
Hey-
for everything. Even in the supermarket, we'll go around, oh, is this a 10 or a 9 or an 8? And then we buy this. If it's less than an 8, we do not buy it.
Have you ever had your pendulum hanging and through a seismic event, like an earthquake? Like,
No.
you know, this when you have them and they're over the sand, and
Oh.
it starts to move, and you come
Oh.
home, and it's like, wow, there's a rose in the sand. How did that happen? You're like, well, you were on
Okay.
vacation. There was a 4.5 yesterday when you were not here.
It is amazing. It works. It really it reads the intelligence of the field. And you
So
are connected to that intelligence.
yeah.
So if you can read auras and all of that, and it's, you know, it's sensing and
Well,
sensing.
if you look at Finding the Living God, that talk, you will see incredible auras around me during that talk.
Well, we're gonna look up your horoscopes here, because you just told us your age. So, and I believe you were born October 5th, right?
Yeah.
So you are a
boy-
rooster in the Chinese, aren't you?
No, I'm a dog.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
That's what
Okay,
his wife
so you're a
says
dog.
anyway.
A dog what? A metal dog, a fire dog, or earth
No,
dog?
a dog year, 1946.
Yeah, but there's an element to your dog.
I don't know.
Okay, I'll have to look it up.
Okay, so Biloxi, Mississippi.
Oh,
Do you know your birth time?
BLOT.
BILOXI. And yeah, I mean, Lisa has just sent me my
At what
birth
time? You
chart.
need to tell us the time.
Oh, 9:05 a.m. Let's go with that. I think that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
But Lisa just kindly sent me my birth chart the last week. I don't want to.
What's
you know,
your rising? You know your rising?
I don't know offhand.
And your moon?
I don't know offhand. Lisa could probably tell you. I need to learn more about astrology. That is clear.
It would just land you right at home.
Yeah, I'm sure. But the pendulum now, tell me about the pendulum for a minute. How do I get one? By Amazon?
Right now, I live in Vermont, and Vermont has an association of dowsers, the American Association of Dowsers. You can go to the website and get a pamphlet or something. They have courses. Now, I was taught by the person who teaches me Jungian practitioner, So he has a different approach. He doesn't go out and douse for water in the fields or other people do all other kinds of energy work. He uses it more for as a personal tool. It is personal extension of the we space. And the we space is you, and the more you pay attention to it, pays attention to you, and your questions are good as your answers, and as you clean up and practice your shadow and so on, and practice more, it is alive. It moves on. It's just it
No,
becomes.
sure.
It's been around forever. It's not something that's new. The Jesuits, or I forget who one of those groups used to use it when they were in the middle of Africa or whatever, which way they go, and so, but it matches Jungian practice very, very well.
Hilda, that's very interesting. I years ago, when I was living in Rome, in Italy, I used that process, the exact process, because I had known about it for since I was a child, and I've been interested in mysticism since I was a young man. So when my spouse and I were thinking about where to live in America, she's from Boston, and we felt as teachers we couldn't move to Boston. And I said, well, let's just try this method with this heavy silver cross, and let's just follow the ley lines in America. And I said, there's a place here, and I had a map of the world. There's a tiny place here near Baltimore. It's called Annapolis. I have no idea what it's like, but the cross is going crazy. It's turning round and round and round. And she said, and then we looked at it on the map. I think it may have been just at the time of the internet, but maybe just before. It was around 1996, 97. And I said, she found out, she said, no, it's a city of there's only about 200,000 people there. We are not going to live in a city with less than 500,000 people, because she was used to Boston. I said, okay. And so we ended up living in Baltimore. But the divination tool, and I use the divination tool to look for water, but I also use it to find out, to give me something to reflect on, like the tarot cards, on where I'm going in life. I definitely was drawn to Annapolis. The interesting thing is, even though we moved to Baltimore, I have worked for the past 20 years in a church which has given me so much life, just 5 miles from Annapolis.
Yes,
Right.
it's really amazing.
Yeah,
Nice.
But I use it daily for, it's I may be writing, or is this the right word? Should I send this email? Or, and it will tell me, or is there a sentence that's not right? And I'll go through it, bing, 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 and it will point out which one you need to
Absolutely.
take out. So it takes a lot of the stress from. I mean, I realize being can also do it. Okay, but this is a modern tool that
what also works, Gilda, is flipping a coin. If you have a yes or no question, should I do this or should I do that? Okay.
Oh no, but this is tuned. This is tuned, and I can feel that the energy, it's like a person.
Mhm.
That's beyond just give me this. I will use the coins for the I Ching. Okay, 3 coins for the I Ching.
Mm-hmm.
The I Ching is also phenomenal. It is
Yeah,
phenomenal. It's just a different perspective that allows you to complete your perspective. But this is like a what do you call when you have an animal of
Totem?
no, the witches have it. What is it? They call
Familiar?
a familiar. This is kind of like a familiar, but it's even
Yes,
more
it is.
more refined, because it just like instruments in bio geometry that read fields in architecture and things,
Mhm.
biogeometry of Ibrahim Karim. Well, this is the same. And there's lots of different ones that come from Egypt. I mean, in Egypt, that they have these Egyptian, he's an Egyptian who designed these things. And some of them were found in the tombstones of some of the pharaohs.
Interesting.
Well, and Lisa just mentioned, has anyone had a coin they tossed, it flipped, and it landed on its edge and stayed?
Oh, that's
I have not. I have not. I've seen it.
Well, this flipping of a coin is a simple trick, which I'll just explain for the benefit of the YouTube audience, which is if you have a yes/no question, you flip a coin and choose heads or tails and look at the result. If you're happy with the result, then stick with it. If you have an urge to flip best 2 out of 3, then yourself wants the other side. You don't have to do the flip. You don't have to do the second and third flips. If you have an urge to do the best 2 out of 3, it means you didn't want the result that came up, and yourself wants the other result, whatever it is.
Well, and then that kind of goes against
2 results, 2 choices. You have to have 2 choices to make that work.
Yes.
So that means you should take the first one, because Jung would say you will find what you want on the path you don't want to go down.
A victory for the self, a victory for the self is a defeat of the ego.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Always go for the extra point. 2-point conversion with the ego. You got to stay ahead of that thing.
Lisa says, I love Annapolis, says Lisa, and I say, come, we're here. Brendan and I are living here. And
so you are in Annapolis.
oh yeah.
I think stepsister of mine lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll show. I'll put my cloaking back on so you can see. But here's my here's my cloaking, and I'll cover my camera for a moment. So this is the entrance to my community, which is a deep water harbor. It's 15 feet deep, which is deeper than almost all the Chesapeake Bay. And on the left side, across the water and on the horizon, is the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And on the right side on the water, across the water, is the eastern shore of Maryland. And we're on the western shore of Maryland, and right where the mouth of this inlet is actually the mouth of the Severn River into the Chesapeake Bay, and we're,
that's nice energy.
Yeah, I'm literally 2 miles from the U.S. Naval Academy, which I did not attend, but I'm 2 miles from it, and so. We hear the bugle calls on a quiet evening or morning. We hear the bugle calls here.
No, I thought it was kind of magical that you covered the camera and we saw through you in a way, because your computer's generated in the background. But that was pretty cool. You went like this and we saw past you. And I knew you were there, but I'm like, if I was a caveman, I'm like, magic. It's like,
yeah. So I don't live in one of these condos where there's a second row of buildings which are the low rent district of our community. So I live back behind these ones that are over my right shoulder in that image.
What's nice, I didn't realize you also live on the Severn River, but I live on a creek, Valentine's Creek, which is right there where the river starts. Basically, the Severn River is only about a mile wide where I am. And so we are connected by the Severn River.
How about that?
Nice.
Yeah, I know that's where you're living now, on Valentine Creek.
I live on. I can see Valentine's Creek out of my window here.
And so you can see the Naval Academy towers and all that stuff.
All that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, we used to have across the across the river from me, but very near where Brendan lives, there used to be 19 towers there, and they were how the Navy communicated with the submarine fleet, literally, until we had satellites, and then they decided to take them down because they're communicating with the submarine fleet by satellite now, and all the mariners insisted that they keep 3 of them up there because that was the only way they could navigate.
So they're landmarks. That's...
I mean, we have a lot of non-seaman sailors around here.
Oh, that's funny.
Unlike present company, I'm an old salt from long ago. And I've managed to almost kill myself any number of times on a sailboat.
Yep.
So anyway, peace, everyone. We'll
All
see
right.
you next
Guys,
week.
have
We'll
a good
come up.
night.